to order. First item is additions or adjustments to the agenda. Are there any additions or adjustments to the agenda? Tom?
I have two is the Historical Society has ice dams on the roof and just looking for some direction on moving forward. And
Would treat you for a beer.
the other one is a letter to Vermont Emergency Management regarding demolition of buyout properties. And then the snow removal.
what?
Yeah, what was that last one?
Oh, demolition of buyout.
Yeah, and then the last one is snow removal at the Hill property off of George Hill Road.
Okay, are there any other additions or adjustments to the agenda? I was putting all those way late because we have a lot of other people here for certain topics. And I don't think those really involve.
I have a couple.
What's the Hill property?
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll get
whether-
to it when we get there.
I don't know if it's more appropriate to do this under select board issues and concerns, but I'd like to add a couple of findings related to our approval of the revolving loan fund.
We could do that under issues or concerns.
You want to do it under issues
Yeah.
and concerns? And then I'd like to propose two potential executive sessions. One to discuss a potential or pending or potential litigation, and the other to discuss questions related to municipal properties that may or may not involve negotiations of real estate.
Okay. Are there any other additions or adjustments to the agenda? We might be setting a record here. Hearing none, our next item up is review invoices and orders. Those are going around. I haven't heard any questions yet. Our next item up is public comment. Is there any public comment at the time? Yes, Charles.
I would just like to know.
Ringtone. That doesn't count as public comment. We don't have our minute taker here tonight, so please speak up so nobody can hear
For the
you.
reminder.
I would just like to know what the status is now of the website for the town.
I'm not sure the exact status. I know that payment has been made, I believe. Rose, check has been cashed.
That I know.
Payment went out on the 20th, I believe, in the order.
I think it was cash last week.
It was, and they sent out an email for the meeting, which is, trying to see if I can find the date and time of that. It's Thursday at 1:30, the onboarding meeting. Just a
Kickoff meeting in 2 days.
preliminary meeting to then figure out which players they want at the true onboarding, just to figure out some organizational next steps. And then probably have whether we want other employees there or not and how that should look.
That's where we're at. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, select board issues or concerns, and Duncan, you want to lead us off with
Yes.
the findings on the revolving loan fund?
Yeah, I'd like to propose two specific findings, which I intended to do when we approved the revolving loan fund, but I forgot. So the two potential findings would be, finding number one, the loan application meets the definition of a micro business, which is 5 employees or fewer. And that is important because if it's a micro business and meets that definition, then it automatically meets the threshold for benefit to low and moderate income persons. So that's finding number one. And finding number two would be the application meets multiple specific purposes as set forth in the revolving loan fund guidance document pertaining to business, economic development, and disaster recovery loans.
Is that a motion, or do you want me to pull the board and see if they have an issue with the findings?
I would move to make those as findings.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
there any further discussion on those two findings? All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed, and the ayes have it.
Thank you very much.
Those findings will be attached to the revolving loan fund.
I mean, they can be, we can attach a copy of this, the minutes of this meeting,
Okay.
and, you know, put it in the file, I guess.
I mean, it should be stored permanently.
Right.
Are there any other issues or concerns from the board? I know we had talked at our last meeting, I don't know if you've talked with Jason, Tom, issue. I don't know if it was an issue, it was a concern at the last meeting about highway overtime, and we had said, come to us with three
Three.
possible solutions, and you recommended one.
Yeah, I did meet with Jason, we didn't formalize them, I can give you a brief summary of what we talked about. It would be best if he was here probably to represent the highway crew, maybe at the next meeting, but they've actually did a test run, so they ran, rather than having, the only person who's at risk is Jason, because he checks roads and has to call everybody in on weekends with on call. So they ran a test pilot where they had number 2, Ryan, be kind of overlooked the weekend, so Jason did not work one weekend, and Ryan called the crew in, they did their overtime plowing and checked the roads, and what that did is it shifted the overtime from Jason who's close to Brian who's not close. So that's probably the most realistic option. We also talked about maybe some policy driven stuff on how to, maybe the smaller 1.5 to 2 inch storms, maybe waiting to the next business hours rather than going in on a Sunday afternoon.
Were they open to that?
Well, Johnson has awesome roads, and so what it does is it takes a great product, and so we talked about maybe that should go to the voters, right? Like, hey, look, we can either, if you want great roads, it's gonna cost you, or do you would like to save money and have less great roads? But that's a hard thing. Policy-driven decisions puts a lot of pressure on the select board, and that's not, it's a tough thing. So not the best solution, because people are gonna be upset no matter how you do it. You're either spending a lot of money or you're passing policies that people disagree with. And we had another option, I can't actually think of it off the top of my head, but we ran up with a few. It looks like the best is shifting that overtime to second in command. So that way Jason's not going over. Problem is, as a road foreman, he's responsible to check the roads on the weekend. And in doing so, he's getting overtime faster than everybody else. So this way, and I think this storm is a great example of why you need somebody to check roads. When you have wind like this, you have to check your drift spots. And we went over all of those to see how we could help mitigate those, but just because the roads are clear by his house, I mean, they might not be clear on Gold Hill, or they might not be clear on Sinclair. So we really do need somebody checking the roads on off hours. So we'll have some solutions for you. When he's here, his next report is March 3rd.
Okay. Any other issues or concerns? Hearing none. Planned purchases is on the agenda, but nothing was added in the packet. Correct, Tom? That has not changed. All right. Next up is an update from the village on the sewer treatment facility. I do have a small caveat. The update will be from Eric and Ken. When the state treasurer gets on, we do have 20 minutes, but we might have to hit pause and deal with that because of the time limitation, but the floor is yours for a presentation on the sewer treatment facility.
All right, well, you guys being close to it already know a lot of it anyway. Obviously we took a huge hit, operationally destroyed the wastewater plant in July 23. The process to bring it back. The way their money works is sometimes they'll allow you to, move it somewhere to get out of the threat. But the rules of that money is that they'll give you up to the money that would take to build it back up to codes and standards and mitigation where it sits. So where it sits, the estimate's between $14 and $15 million to bring it you know, put it back in, raise it up, bring it up to current codes and standards and such. That would bring the SBRs that far above, you know, where the July 23 flood was. So that's a little short-sighted.
Yeah, are you comfortable with that far
No.
above?
I'm not. I'm not. That's why we're here.
So to be clear, did the floodwaters in July 23 get to within a few inches?
It went over. It went in.
It went into the SBR?
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. The tanks were submerged. Yep. It only went over by about that much, but
Well,
yeah.
that's quite a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, those are way up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was something else.
So at the end of the day, you're not in love with it just
Right.
$15 million giving you this much above 23.
Correct.
And that must be lifting the headworks facility
So
and all
that-
of that.
That the plan for if we have to go down there is the entire control building will get bulldozed. Because not only was it inundated to 8 feet up on the upper floor, but you know, it's concrete block construction. All the insulation was blown out of it, and block construction doesn't meet current codes and standards anyway. So that would be removed. It would be a new building, sitting about where the job trailer was sitting for a long time. And then the SBR would go up. There'd be other stuff on a wraparound around it. The concrete blocky thing that's in the middle of the parking lot, which is the inflow pump station and all, that would actually move up to, well, hopefully where the medical facility is, if that's the best spot. If not, it'll be in the side yard of the fire station.
That's not a big side yard, is it?
No, it's not a big building. We're talking about a building that wouldn't be any bigger than your table. Yeah, so it's a small spot. It would just be, it would be deep, it'd have pumps in it, it'd have room for one desk with a computer monitor that you could, you know, if you couldn't get to the facility, you could get in there and shut things on or off that you could do remotely. That would actually, whatever's done there would be the same in either the plan of staying there or moving it. That would be the same. The one thing would be the same either way. So the better option is to move it uphill. You know, like if it's keeps on getting flooded, maybe you don't need to be there. You know, and with the piping, with the available lands and the cost of piping and everything else, the only place that really makes sense is where we are currently sitting. This lot right here. It would basically, that would be an extra, you know, 12 to 14 million dollars to put it here versus down there. That which would also include dozing and benching that whole area and returning to the floodplain. Okay, it would give us extra storage in the Guion, like knocking that all down.
So all of the buildings would move up here in that scenario?
It would be different. It would be a different building, you know, it would be, yeah, but the whole plant would move and basically take over the print of the build, probably about to here in this building and the whole park.
Basically become one building.
So the SBR.
Control
everything
buildings,
would-
the whole bit would be.
Everything that come up.
That's what would add that massive cost probably plus location being
At
different.
the end of the day, the delta between using the existing, raising it up and putting it here is,
8 feet.
no, the delta is
Oh, it's almost
cost.
double in cost, right?
So it goes from 15 to 30 million.
Right.
But there is other funds to get us to a new location.
So, well, not that, well, there is
That's
potential.
maybe.
There's potential that, there's a community development block grant of $63 million, of which 58 and change are dedicated to Lamoille and Washington County. And they are looking at the best projects for that.
That's an outright grant as opposed to.
Outright grant. And
You could pair that money potentially with FEMA money and
exactly. And the idea what we had would be to put in for the wastewater facility along with, possibly, options for, the personnel that work here, i.e. maybe rehabbing McClellan Hall, or something like that as one grant project. That's the hope. Because that's going to hit the governor's priorities. Because infrastructure and housing,
So you are smiling because you feel like this grant has a possibility of happening.
absolutely.
We haven't smiled.
We've already got,
Well, you both got a little smile, which
we've already got
the
some
governor
state
giving you
people
love.
kind of, he hasn't yet, but one of his workers has. And we want to go to the upcoming Johnson Capital for a Day. It's all about this grant. That meeting is all about, listening to the community's projects, ideas for that money.
All in all, the question is, would the town like to see the village put a sewer treatment plant back where it's been flooded 4 times now, once when it was being built?
did it really get flooded when it was being built?
Absolutely.
No
Or is
kidding.
it better for the community to turn around and work together, and nobody wants to see this building go away, but we've searched for lots, there's no lots.
And it seems like the piping from there to here
Minimal.
is minimal.
And if you add,
Which
Well, basically you wouldn't go from there to here,
you'd go from there to here.
straight across. Yeah.
In elevation wise, that works. You can
Yeah.
put the elevation of that works.
Right. I mean, you would do it the same way it is down there where, you're stepping up this high into the first floor. It's just that first, this high from here is a lot higher than down there.
Yeah. Not that I have heavy concerns, but you mentioned maybe the effluent building, whatever.
Influent.
Their terminologies I don't understand.
Yes.
and is,
So it's the pump
But
station.
if that went where the health center building is, I only asked because we've approved a buyout. So, and this really is not a hinge
Right.
point for
This
me
is-
either way, but they would be stepping out of the buyout process. I
This is
assume if that, and they have the right to do that.
LCPC is
Right.
looking in that if it's possible to subdivide a small section on this end of it and have it not hinder the buyout.
That would
if
be-
you go right beside the road.
Right.
That would be really useful information for us to know when you get an answer.
Right.
And
Oh, absolutely.
But it wouldn't have to be, would it?
Right. We could.
well, no, but if they answered that question, so where mine's going, we also approved a buyout application for the Pomelo property. And there was questions about parking for the bank that's adjacent there and everything, and if a pre-buyout subdivision before, even though they've already signed the buyout
That'd be good
process,
for them.
is feasible,
That'd be really good for them.
it would just be nice to know if it's on the table, just
Right.
that's all.
Right. Yeah, if I have heads up, I'll let you guys know on that.
Yep.
Is there a significant advantage to having that headworks pump at that location versus this location?
Yes, I mean, because, well, it's,
We're not engineers.
yeah, I'm not, according to my engineer, yes. I haven't looked at, I haven't done the slopes, but he has. So, according to the engineer, that spot there is really,
Eric,
yes.
so if it were located here,
Yes,
in a site that did flood, the critical infrastructure would be well out of danger.
absolutely. Right, you would have, your tanks would be partially buried, but a high wall, just like you are down there. Your control building is gonna have, a foundation that high. And remember, we got 8 inches here.
Plus 12-foot basement.
Right. So, yeah, it would be, and if it, if we went 3-4 feet up here, what part of your village is left at that point?
Clay Hill.
Mark's property.
Yeah.
You know,
But, tell me a little bit about this grant. Is there a to be completed by December 26th, or do you know any of the parameters?
I don't, it's too early for that. They haven't even ordered them yet, so yeah.
Okay, but does the state have possession of the grant money? Just the way money's being pulled back nowadays.
Full possession, a good question. I mean,
But
there's
this-
some grants that are state money and,
I know, yeah.
So this would be CDBG money, not
right,
HFGP money,
BDG recovery funds, that's what they're calling it.
Yeah.
recovery funds. Okay. And are you guys keeping in any of the scenarios same capacity that you currently have? Are you increasing, reducing?
we would increase by about 10%, 9 to 10%, because you can go up 10% without getting a bunch of reviews and, Act 250 and all that stuff. So we'll stay within the Act 250 and,
But if there was growth of your wastewater treatment system,
yeah,
you'd be able
we've
to-
already got a great deal of, capacity that right now, and would add 10% to that. So
We'd like to have growth. We'd like the college to go back up to
right, we'll have-
100 kids.
we've got the
Yeah,
capacity, and we'll have more.
Yeah.
And so basically, we're here because, the grant funders will basically want to see a big group hug that both sides of Johnson's government, are on board together. Want to make this happen.
When you said that part of did I understand you correctly to say that part of the grant would be not only demolishing the buildings, but basically allowing or flood benching the site to allow for additional
That wouldn't
flood
necessarily be part
capacity?
of the grant, it'd be part of the project for
Yeah,
sure.
going to the floodplain restoration.
Right, it's all part of the
Floodplain
project.
restoration.
Yep, it'll be. flood-
So FEMA wouldn't cover that piece, that might potentially be another
Right.
source of funding.
Yep,
I think it would fall under, probably, HMGP is maxed out, but I think it would probably fall under a similar project where it would be a separate grant. Flood benching would be after this project is done. I think it would be a buyout and then a relocation, kind of two different things. But
Well, So I'm excited about this. I have no firm opinion one way or the other about McClellan. I like the idea.
Mhm.
Who knows
right,
about that? But if the grant works for you to be here and for us to have a building somewhere higher than this, whether it be a light industrial park, God forbid, or some other place
right.
that's because I am not. I love McClellan, but I have no idea what kind of a thing that is.
All in all, I think we're here to get the temperature of your board to whether or not you'd be willing to sell this building to the village, to be able to pursue the conversation with state and feds about possibly going here, or whether you don't want to, and then we can forget about this idea and go back to our original plan and keep moving forward. That's kind of where we're
We
at.
could do you want a temperature check? I'll pose the question this way, you can add to it if you want. Is the board open to concepts if the funding stack allows our municipal building to move at no cost to
Yeah,
property taxpayers, are you open to the concept?
All for group hugs.
yeah, I'm certainly open.
I'll listen.
You're open to concepts.
I'll listen to it. You're telling me that to build a wastewater treatment plant on this footprint is gonna be approximately $30 million? Good grief, the one that you're in right now was built for 2.5, maybe? Rosemary? That was around 2.5 million.
Upgrade,
That was it.
some of the buildings were there.
Right,
some of the
but-
stuff was
But
there.
the upgrade was approximately 2 million, and that was a big upgrade too.
25.
That was 25 years ago.
Yeah, but still,
What's
I
$30 million
still
worth
can't
today?
believe that it's gonna cost $30 million to build a wastewater treatment plant. It's not gonna be a huge plant.
Well, you understand that that house you live in would cost you twice as much as it did to build that right now?
The
Well,
question,
fine, then it should be 15 million then for the whole thing.
well, the question right now is, are we open to the concept? You said you'd listen.
I'll listen as
I
long as
don't know what
we
it
don't
does.
have any outlays and we have a building to go into without going into underneath the Masonic temple or something for 2 years until something gets sugared off. I'm not interested in that.
Are you open to concepts?
I'm open to hearing concepts and I'd like more information.
Is that, I mean, it sounds like the board's open to the idea. It would be kind of tricky, because we would probably need to move first, right, before this building was demolished.
Well, yeah,
An interim.
I don't wanna be
place,
hearing the bulldozers.
Where, do you have your high vis vest? Charles has a question.
Just wanted, the plan for the college, is out there. McClellan is not ADA compliant and it's also got asbestos, so it's not gonna be a free move for you to go straight up there.
That's the piece I want more information.
Yeah, I
It's a
think-
75-year-old building that's full of asbestos.
It's a waste of time.
That
as far
building
as I'm
also
concerned.
has $500,000 of congressionally directed spending in the wings with former Memorial Housing Partnership. Senator Sanders' office gave $550,000 for that building to be converted to housing. So how that, whether there's housing and municipal office in the same location, that's another moving part.
Yeah,
And I'd like to know where they came up with the 450 or 500 million to do that conversion, because that sounds low to me.
thousand, not million. I don't think. If I'm guessing the temperature of the board, I don't know if any of the board is married to the idea of McClellan Hall specifically.
Yeah.
But
And
but
that's
we're
what I
married
said
to
too.
concepts and more information, and if it works out,
Yeah, that
For
was
both
just kind of
municipalities.
a possibility, it's like,
Mhm.
it's,
Yeah.
right?
Maybe we add on to the library even more.
We probably need to have further discussions and when we actually start about,
Second stories.
when we actually talk about property acquisitions, we would need to do that in executive
I
session.
mean,
once
there's
you guys
there's
get
just
that.
an opportunity right now with 80% of that funding having to be spent in 2 counties.
Yeah,
That's
Oil County, and then towards Berry, so.
Did you say has to be spent
Has to
in
be
2
spent
counties?
In 2 counties alone, so. And with a large amount, yes, we'd assume Berry would get way more.
Yeah.
But that's still a pretty good chunk of money playing around that Johnson isn't gonna exist without the college or that sewer plant.
it's certainly needed for the community, for sure.
Cool.
I do believe we're running up on 7. I don't see the state treasurer online. Is there any last remarks you guys want to get in? You did get the answer you were looking
Yeah,
for,
we just
asking the
want to be able
question.
to have a conversation with the people that he's been dealing with about possibly doing it here. Because the conversation comes up and we go. So,
It sounds like we're open to ideas.
Yeah,
Want more info?
just be forewarned, the seniors.
we've already talked about that. We would simply move their lot from there to up front. They'd have curbside, they'd have parking right there.
yeah.
They would get what they would, and it's up to them to build their own building. We just gotta provide you.
That would fulfill the need of the deed, correct?
It would.
They're a force to be reckoned with.
Yep,
Certainly.
Very exciting.
thank you.
Good
Thank-
job.
Thank you both for coming and
Yeah,
answering
yeah.
questions. I know nothing about sewer treatment facilities and one of my goals in life is to maintain that ignorance.
You go down, you don't think you're-
I don't blame you.
That's really pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
When I first got into business, like, I don't know if I'll do that, and then I got to look at it and said, wow, this is actually a lot of fun. You never get bored as a wastewater operator.
Well, these SBR plant, I mean, this was one of the first SBR plants in the state.
Be first.
Randall, have you tried getting in touch with,
Thank you, folks.
we can go
Thanks, guys.
on to some next items and leave it open as long as, oh, there we go.
Oh, there he is.
Very timely. That's good. Can you unmute?
Yeah, can you get him up a little bigger too?
Can we expand him?
Yeah,
A little bigger.
get rid of Peter.
Yeah, that's fine.
Make my-
Do we have to turn the owl off or?
There
Oh, there we
are.
go. Beautiful.
Ooh, boy, we can see the pores on your face.
Yeah, yes, too.
You can hear us. Can we hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, we
Well,
can.
thank you for this opportunity and joining us tonight. The floor is yours with a presentation, and our lights went out.
That's okay.
But Rosemary,
Should
I was
we-
still focused on you.
Evan, should we do introductions just so he knows who we are? So
Very good idea.
Yeah,
would that be useful?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Tom, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I'm Tom Gallinet. I'm the town administrator for the town of Johnson.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Peter Hammond, newest wet behind the ears member of the select board.
At least you didn't say youngest.
yeah. Mark Woodward, I'm about to retire from the select board and I'm the second youngest.
Evan Patch, Chair of the Select Board.
Mike Dunham, oldest selectman.
Duncan Hastings, next to oldest member of the select board.
Rosemary Oliver, treasurer.
I'm not sure if you can see Randall from where you are, but he is in the room as well. Randall Zott is our Community and Economic Development Specialist. And you've been in contact with Peter.
Yeah, nice. Well, nice to see everybody. Nice to see you, Randall. Nice to meet everybody that I haven't met before and see some folks that we've seen around the state. But really appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. I thought I'd talk. I had a prepared PowerPoint presentation, but then I sort of scrapped it and thought maybe it'd just be better to talk and talk about the importance of housing relative to economic development, both for the state of Vermont and for local communities, and then leave time for questions from select board members or whomever else has any questions for me. But I'm Mike Pichak. I'm the state treasurer. I'm in my second term as state treasurer. Before that, I was the commissioner at the Department of Financial Regulation for about 6 years, and then a deputy commissioner there for a couple of years before that. I grew up in Brattleboro, and I live in Winooski now. And I spent a few years out of state as well before coming back to work for the state of Vermont about 11 years ago. And, I guess there's a couple of different ways to frame the housing conversation. I like to frame it from my own personal experience. And there's a couple of ways to go on that too, but I've moved back to Vermont a couple of times, once from New York City, once from Miami when I was finishing law school. And both times I moved back to Vermont, I was surprised by the cost of housing, both in terms of its absolute cost, like the absolute cost of rent, or the percentage of your income that goes to housing. When I moved back from Miami, the place that I lived and the place I rented in Winooski were the same cost. It was the same cost of rent. And the place in Miami was in a desirable neighborhood and, had sort of a newer building with those amenities that you might think about in a city. And I was, quite shocked by that. And then when I moved back from New York, it was not an absolutely higher amount, but it was certainly a higher percentage of my income going toward housing. And we recommend, just as a personal financial advice, that you don't spend more than 25-30% of your income on housing. And routinely in Vermont, we see folks over 30%, over 40%, over 50%. And when that happens, you're just really crowding out other areas like saving for retirement, or saving for a down payment for a home, or saving to go to higher ed and the like. So it just was really struck me how expensive housing was in Vermont when I moved back home. And then I started to think about that impact on the broader economy. Prior to the pandemic, we used to have discussions and cabinet meetings about the future of Vermont and the challenges we were facing. And oftentimes the challenges came back to demographics. We were an older state, our population wasn't growing, our workforce was getting smaller. The smaller workforce was putting more economic pressure on businesses and on tax revenue. And at that moment, prior to the pandemic, having been back home for 6 years, I was really sort of worried about the future direction of the state. Were we sustainable as a state? Were we going to be able to, continue to experience the Vermont that we love, but do it in a way that people can afford, and do it in a way that has a healthy and vibrant economy where people can earn an income and be successful in starting or growing a business, or working for a successful business. So the pandemic really changed that, I think, for a lot of communities. And certainly it changed my perspective on the needs for housing in Vermont. We saw for the first time in a while a pretty significant increase in housing demand because people had moved to Vermont. When I sort of finished my pandemic work and decided to run for treasurer, I went to every town in Vermont, 252 towns, and that was sort of part of the campaign. And we had opportunity to talk to town clerks and town administrators and local business owners and sort of communities in every part of the state. And it just was fascinating how consistent the stories were, that people said that their town was very busy because they had a lot of land transactions, that people were moving to town. They were buying homes without any conditions, with cash, that it was driving up the cost of housing. People were moving with their remote jobs, generally younger people with younger families. So a lot of that was good news in a way, but it also presented unique challenges to our housing stock. We had people moving to Vermont. We had people moving to Vermont with higher incomes. That was reflected in tax revenue we were collecting at the state. We saw our personal income tax numbers go up dramatically from like 750 million, 800 million per year to now 1.2, 1.3 billion per year during the sort of 4 to 5 years during the pandemic. So we've been collecting more revenue. We've seen our population numbers increase. Other taxes have gone up as a result, but the cost of housing has really skyrocketed because we haven't kept up with the pace of that demand. But the reason I tell that story is because the sort of pre-pandemic era where we had high housing costs, but relatively low demand, it seemed, to move to Vermont, that was a really challenging environment to think about how do we build a future for our state. In a post-pandemic world, and we have to capitalize on it because it won't necessarily exist there forever, where people have a demand to live in Vermont. They've rethought how they want to live. They've rethought what communities they want to live in, how they want to balance their work and personal life. They have the ability to work remotely, gives them the opportunity to live almost anywhere in the world. That's a real opportunity for us. And we've seen the kind of growth over the last few years that can result in that. So we're at this sort of moment in time now in Vermont where we have to sort of decide the direction that we're heading over the next couple of years, but certainly the direction and the impact that will have over the next couple of decades. There's a housing assessment that's done periodically by the state of Vermont, and it determined that we are about 41,000 homes sort of needing to be built by 2030. That's about 7,000 homes per year. And that's sort of just to keep pace with the demand and the need that exists now. A lot of studies suggest we're under the amount of homes that we need in Vermont today, that when we have a shortage of homes, it increases housing costs, it increases rates of homelessness, it puts more pressure on our medical centers because people are going that are living outside to the emergency department, which is putting pressure on emergency departments. It's harder to treat substance use disorder. It's harder to get people housed that are having mental health issues. That sort of housing first model is hard to implement when you don't have housing to begin with. So it is not just pressure on housing and the cost of housing and your personal economics. It's really impacting Vermont more broadly. It's, in my opinion, holding back the full potential of the Vermont economy, because a lot of the businesses you talk to say they'd love to expand, they'd love to do more in their business, but they can't find workers because those workers can't find housing. So in Vermont broadly, this is, I think, our biggest economic challenge. I think it's also our biggest social challenge for the reasons I mentioned. It drives the rates of homelessness. It drives the cost of healthcare. It makes it harder to treat mental health issues and substance use disorder as well when you don't have a safe place for people to live. And unfortunately, in some ways, the problem's not going to necessarily get easier for us over the next decade. I mentioned the people that have moved to Vermont during the pandemic. And what I describe happening there is a lot of people moved to Vermont, took a house off of the market. So they bought a house, but they didn't add a job to the local workforce. You know, they had a remote job. So it put even more pressure on those of us that earn our living from Vermont. The housing stock went down for those of us that are in the Vermont workforce, physically working in Vermont. Something else is going to happen over the next decade. We have an older workforce that is set to retire at a pretty significant rate over the next 7 or 8 years. And we're going to see people leaving the workforce for retirement, but not necessarily opening up their house because they plan to stay in Vermont during their retirement, or they plan to partially stay in Vermont and hold on to their house while they live in Vermont and other places throughout the year. So that pressure on our housing stock is going to be omnipresent over the next decade as we try to build enough housing to support our economy and support our communities. Now, for Johnson, you know, if you think about the number that, you know, basically every community needs to build to sort of meet this 41,000 goal, I took a look at how the Department of Housing sort of frames that. And, you know, the 41,000 homes for Johnson means that, you know, it's about 84 homes over the next 6-7 years to that 2030 goal. You're on pace to build, I think it's like 68 homes over that period of time. You've been building about average of 14 units per year. So you're not that far away from hitting your goal. And if every community was able to hit its proportional goal, then we'd have no problem getting there. But it does sound like a big number, 41,000, 7,000 homes a year, particularly when we think about the fact that we've only been building about 2,300 homes a year as of late. So we have a significant gap that we need to make up in terms of more housing. How, you know, this reflects in a local community, I think there's a variety of ways. I think a lot of our towns in Vermont are dealing with the issue that there is, I'm just speaking generally, this is not necessarily true for Johnson, but plenty of homes that are available for people at the higher or mid-high income levels, and then maybe a lot of affordable housing, but there's not a lot of middle-class housing or workforce housing for people that are key to our workforce. I know that's a struggle broadly in Vermont. Oftentimes those that are in affordable housing have a lot of subsidies that help that housing get built and then help people be able to stay in that housing. For those that are in the upper income levels, you know, they don't need the support to be able to build and live in their homes. So it's really that middle class and working class housing that is critical. And often there's a significant gap for that kind of housing. And what does that mean for a community? I mean, it means that many of the workers that we need to be our teachers and our firefighters and our retail workers, our nurses are priced out of communities, and they have a really hard time living and working in all various parts of Vermont. It means that the grand list for a town is not as robust as it should be. So you have fewer homes, fewer properties carrying the load of the municipal administrative costs, when otherwise that could be spread over more homes, more people, more taxpayers. And there's also, of course, just a vibrancy factor, you know, sort of the virtuous cycle potentially, if you want to call it that a community could be on, with more housing, more workers, more people active in the community, spending their money locally, engaged in the local economy, engaged in nonprofits, giving back to the community, and a whole host of economic and non-economic benefits that come from that. So just a couple of thoughts about what a community can, be thinking about. And most of these, I'm sure you're already thinking about in terms of supporting housing in your community. But, I think there's a lot of land that state of Vermont owns. There's a lot of land that municipal governments own. There's land that large employers own. And oftentimes the availability of buildable land is one of the things that holds back the development of new housing construction. So a town like Johnson, or any town in Vermont, sort of taking an inventory of the public lands that they own, an assessment of its ability to be developed for housing, I think is a good practice for communities that are interested in supporting more housing in their town. Certainly working with large employers, both in terms of their desire to potentially invest in housing and employer-sponsored housing, but also their own ownership and control of land that potentially could be good for housing development, I think are productive conversations to have. And then there's a couple of just basic things that I know communities are struggling with: the ability to build and upgrade and keep their infrastructure safe from flooding. But providing infrastructure is critical to housing development, and making sure that your zoning laws are up to date to support housing development as well. So those are things I'm sure Johnson has been thinking about. I know a lot of other communities across Vermont are making varying degrees of progress on all of that. The state of Vermont is trying to do what it can to be supportive as well, particularly on the investment side and on the infrastructure side. There are things that have happened in the last few years. Our office has committed $100 million to investing in low interest loans across Vermont to support new housing. There's more monies that are going toward housing above that. We're trying to find ways in Montpelier to support infrastructure for local communities as well. I think there's a lot more conversations to be had in that regard. But, on the whole, when I think about Vermont today, and I think about Vermont 5 years ago before the pandemic, I'm just much more optimistic about our future, because I know we can solve this housing issue. I wasn't sure we could solve this demand to move or live in Vermont issue that I felt prior to the pandemic. I think the demand is there, the interest is there. We have natural beauty, natural outdoor recreation opportunities. We have a lot of things going for us, but the big thing, the big hurdle, again, from every angle, is the shortage of housing. And any community, in my estimation, that's interested in supporting more housing is going to distinguish themselves over the next decade and beyond in Vermont as a wealthier, more successful community as a result. So happy to take any questions that folks might have. Happy to go in any direction on housing or other issues that might be pertinent to the town.
Thank you very much. I believe Mark has a question.
Oh, I have a whole list of things. But one of the things that we have in this town is we have a college that has a lot of property, and my sense is that there's property there that could become housing, either in the existing dorms. I mean, if I had my way, they could take a couple of those dorms and make them into senior housing, and I'd buy a condo there. So.
As opposed to doing it with students?
Yeah, I'd rather there be students, but I don't think that's gonna happen, judging because of the demographics. The other thing about demographics, we're an old state, and I'm looking around this room here. 20 years from now, there's gonna be a handful of us that aren't gonna be here, and we're gonna be in those houses are gonna be, Evan will be here.
There's only a handful of us in this room.
I know. But I look around, and it's safe to say there's 4 of us that in 20 years are gonna be quite old. If not here, or dead. you know, and that's gonna happen. You
Yeah.
talk, but, you know, my house is gonna come up for sale one of these days, and Peter's and Mike's and Duncan's, you know, so is this a cyclical thing that's gonna happen? And the other thought I had is Johnson is clearly becoming a bedroom community.
Yep.
In the county.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot there to unpack. I'll start with the older Vermonter housing, because I think that's a critical piece. And I usually try to mention that whenever I talk, because, you know, I talked about the workforce over the next, you know, let's call it 6 or 7 years. The Department of Labor estimates that 80,000 plus people are going to retire from the Vermont workforce over the next 7 years, I believe it is. That's a significant number. And how are we going to replace them, period, is one question. And then how are we going to replace them if we don't have housing for them to be able to be replaced? I mean, it will be impossible unless we free up some housing. So I think
Place for these people to move to.
Yeah, exactly. One of the strategies around housing has to be thinking about housing for older Vermonters to be able to downsize in their community, because people don't want to leave their community. Not everybody's the same. Also, some people want to stay in their house, but some people want an option to not be in their house. It could be cheaper, it could be less maintenance, less upkeep, but there's just no option to begin with. And then therefore, to your point about demographics, I'd much rather have a community that has a mixed age where, you know, people are sort of all age spectrums. So you don't have any dramatic booms and busts, but you could imagine a community that has a lot of older people, and those older people are all, you know, passing away, needing to move to assisted living, whatever, at the same time. And a lot of housing becomes available. The demand isn't there. The amenities in the community aren't there. And you're really in a really tough situation versus a community that has a lot of different age groups, and you're never experiencing that sort of boom and bust. So to your point about, is it a demographic thing? You know, other states are experiencing what Vermont is experiencing, where we're sort of on the leading tip of the spear. I think part of the strategy in Vermont is to have people move here so that it's not just, it's not just that we have this demand of housing and then it goes away when older Vermonters are moving away or dying. We want there to be strong demand for people to move to Vermont at all age groups. The one piece of information that I thought was pretty hopeful was from some IRS data that showed the age of people moving to Vermont over the last few years, and they did tend to be younger. Now, of course, that may not be being felt in Lamoille County. That may be more of a Chittenden County thing. But, but overall, unlike years before, younger people had demonstrated a commitment to moving to Vermont. And then the last point I just wanted to make on your point about the bedroom community, I think that's absolutely right. Like, you see Franklin County in many ways just sort of being lumped in with Chittenden County, the same for Addison County, Washington County. And I think Lamoille is sort of another place. Certainly Morrisville's seen a lot of housing growth, and Waterbury has seen a lot of housing growth. And I think Johnson could continue to see that because you're relatively more affordable than some other of the places that I just mentioned. Oh, and to your point about the college, I think that's a really important point. And I think that's sort of what I was trying to emphasize, is trying to find, because they're both an employer, that's critical, but they're also a big landholder. And if I understand it correctly, there's infrastructure at the college. So you're checking a lot of boxes with partnering. And the other big piece about it too is that it's elevated, and I think generally away from any possibility of flooding. So for a town like Johnson, it seems like that conversation could be very, very productive.
Thank you. Peter?
Question. So when we talk about funding sources to help develop housing, my experience in the past has been there's a fair amount available for senior housing and for housing that requires some degree of subsidy, but not much available to develop middle income housing.
Yeah, that's a good point, Peter.
Do you see any prospect of that resource growing?
Yeah. When I was talking about where we, where we're better situated on housing, which is sort of toward that affordable, capital A affordable housing, and then, individuals that have the means to, support themselves and housing either that they've been in for a long time or new housing. That middle area, I think, is why the pressure is there is because it's harder to build and it's not subsidized, right? To your point. So, just in our program that I mentioned that we established, a lot of our money of the 100 million did support capital A affordable housing, but a lot of our money also supported workforce housing and market rate housing. So I think it is important to support it across the board. You need all of the housing types. And even more so, to your point, in some ways, we need to even focus more on that missing middle income workforce housing. The one way to answer your question directly, how can the state of Vermont or a community support, market rate housing, workforce housing? I do think the infrastructure is the key, because that a developer building that infrastructure is really expensive, and that can be the difference between a project working or not working. And the other thing that supporting infrastructure does is it gets, the government becomes sort of agnostic as to what is built on that piece of land. It could be affordable, it could be workforce, it could be market rate. But when the government gets into the business of directly subsidizing a private developer, it gets kind of tough to figure out how to create a program that's fair and is not, doesn't have conflicts, and you're not picking a winner or a loser, all those kind of things that you sometimes worry about with government. But I think if you support that infrastructure, you're taking care of a lot of the costs that a market developer or a workforce housing developer would be facing. But again, you're doing it at an agnostic basis. You're not supporting a specific project. You're sort of supporting a particular area with the infrastructure.
Thanks.
Duncan?
I've got a whole laundry list too, but I'll try and limit it. So I'm on the Lamoille County Regional Planning Commission, and this board hasn't heard about it yet, because we're just hearing about it at the Planning Commission level of the targets and thresholds. You mentioned 41,000 housing units statewide. The regional planning commissions are going to be incorporating into the regional plan and ultimately down to the municipal level, ideas and thoughts about specific housing targets that each municipality is going to have to meet. My initial comment on that is that sounds great in principle. However, all things being equal, as you point out, there is such a thing as market housing. And if there is not a market in a particular community,
Right.
I don't care what threshold you set, you just aren't going to meet it, period. But having said that, one of the things that I think is useful or could be useful for the state to think about, to Peter's point, is developing a model that can be, quote, affordable, but be an owner-occupied unit, and creating incentives for people to own their units. And I think that could go a long way to meeting that workforce development piece. Johnson, for example, we've got 3 mobile home parks and a lot of apartment buildings.
And a low-income housing complex.
And a low-income housing complex. And there are a lot of people in our community who feel that we've met our obligation for affordable housing within the county. So I think anything that we can do that sort of gets a model out there that can be owner-occupied really will make a big difference in perception and availability for people.
Yeah, 100% is a great point.
Not necessarily, I mean, single family is one option, but even townhouses, you know, having owner occupied townhouses where there's built-in affordability, you know, based on what you can resell it for. But it gives somebody that's getting started an opportunity to get started, then hopefully move up to another housing unit and make that one available, you know, for somebody else who's trying to get started.
Is that because we are time limited? I'm just trying to be concise.
Yeah.
Is that your main one?
That's the main one.
And
I can leave it at that.
I just want to jump in on that. I come from a completely different world than everybody else on the board here. Because I am the person that the state's trying to attract, I guess, hopefully.
And we're glad you're here.
You keep saying young people and everybody's rolling their eyes in here. I've said numerous times to numerous people, there is a model that could work for workforce development, and I'm glad that you brought it up. The model is when you're subsidizing these projects, they need to build them differently. I work on, I'm gonna go ahead and say the majority of low-income housing projects in northern Vermont. I know how they're built. And I also know that if they were built a little bit differently, and yes, it may cost a little bit more money, and if there were a way for some of those people to transfer into ownership of a condo unit instead of a tiny apartment built slightly bigger, and all that's really gonna do is get the younger kids, my age or younger, over the hurdle of the first purchase. Once they have equity building, I'm a proponent of they can roll that equity and then buy a larger house or independent single family home. But they're not, these low income housing nonprofits, while they may serve a need, I'm gonna go ahead and just be frank, they're just soaking up state money, and the executives of these nonprofits and board members are paid very well. They're soaking up the need, but it's not being built to get any kid my age out of the hole. It's being built, and they're saying, you can look at downstreet housing if you want. What are they targeting? They're not setting a rent. They're just saying 40% of your paycheck, right?
Right.
And I think they're looking at a place in Waterbury right now. The building that they're building doesn't even have enough parking spots for the units in the building. How are you ever going to turn that into a condo? You know, you need to have a parking lot where you could have two vehicles, slightly larger units. So that way, you know, and the system could be, yeah, if you pay your rent for 2 years on time, you have an option to purchase, and you have to come up with a down payment. And then these nonprofit agencies could make money on condo association fees or whatever. They're still going to make money. And they're using the state money to build these buildings heavily. I think you acknowledged that quite a bit. I'm very interested in workforce housing. Another thing that you mentioned is the amount of land the state owns. You know, and Mark brought up the college, but look at a map. I think 20% of the acres in Johnson is owned by the state in one way, shape, or form, right? Mark only mentioned a 300-acre chunk. Fish and Game owns an 800-acre chunk right behind my house. They also own an incredible amount of land all the way through, thanks to the Long Trail. So the state used money to purchase up and protect the Long Trail. And I'm not saying don't protect the Long Trail, but do you need 2 miles of a barrier for people?
Balance.
So there is a lot of opportunity for single family homes, which I'm heavily supportive. But for kids my age to get over the hurdle of a first time home purchase, I think that is huge. And I've said it to several people, even working on the projects.
Yeah.
So I know that you're not the sole fixer of that problem. It just seems overly obvious to me to remove the barrier to entry to the market for young kids.
Well, I mean, yes to both of your points. I mean, it keeps younger people here, it gives them an opportunity for home ownership. They don't have to go somewhere else, right? I mean, and it attracts people to come here and keeps them here. You're connected to the community when you own something. You build roots, you make them deeper. You get into the community in ways that you don't necessarily if you can't find housing, or you think you can only stay in a particular community for a couple of years because you can't afford to live there long term. So, you know, I think having those pathways to home ownership are really critical. this town of Middlebury, I just wanted to use as an example. They have a development of about 200 units that's underway. The College of Middlebury, the Middlebury College, they analyze where they own property, and I think they own like 6,000 acres in the county of Addison. And they identified a few hundred acres that sort of were prime for development, and they, at a reduced, financial, rate, provided that for a developer. And the developer is building some of those shared equity units that you're talking about that I think are that sort of bridge between rental and ownership. So I agree with you. I'm a big proponent of supporting that shared equity model because it is a big and important footstep toward, it is home ownership, but it's a footstep toward, outright market rate ownership. And the more we can get people on that ladder and the more we can build the housing for them, both shared equity and what they eventually will buy as a starter home, the better off we'll be for it.
There are a couple other things. I don't want to hold you up because I know that you're time sensitive. But one other thing that's preventing people from even selling buildable lots for single family homes is taxes.
Yeah.
They're portioning off lots over a 10-year period because, I don't want to get whacked with capital gains taxes, this or that. And I understand that you don't set the tax rates or the tax laws. I'm just saying there's a hurdle that the state could remove or work with. And the other one is the current use program. A lot of people signed up with ag land for current use because it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right? But to get out of it, your hurdle is $10,000 an acre for the first 2 acres. There could be exemptions for something of that matter. I'm not expecting you to solve these tonight, and I want
No, it's important.
board members have things to say. I want them to have their time. Please understand, this is not a me complaining at you session. It's just a
No, not at all.
sharing thoughts.
I love it. I mean, we always try to, we love going into communities and hearing what's on people's mind because it helps bring back ideas. And, we're in Montpelier, we're not on the ground like you are, and you have much better sense of how things are playing out in real time in your communities. And it's important to hear that.
Do other board members have further questions?
You got talking about taxes and property transfer tax. I think that's outrageous, to tell you the truth.
I was talking about if you were to buy a 30-acre lot and provide spec lots, you would pay immense capital gains taxes if you sold those in a short period of time. There's a road in Johnson where you'll notice a new house goes in every 5 years. I think there's a reason for that. But if there's no other questions from the board, if you have any closing remarks, great. I appreciate you staying 10 minutes past. I know you were.
Oh yeah. No, I appreciate you, engaging. Happy to visit next time I'm in Johnson also. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me in my office. And just the closing remark will not be on housing, but just on your service to your community. I think serving on a select board or a city council or a school board is some of the hardest public service because you're so front and center on the issues of your community, and community members have so much access to you. So it's really important for all communities that they have strong leadership at that community level. And just thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like being able to zoom in. People don't have to drive a million miles.
It's nice. Yeah, it's
That's
certainly
commendable.
handy
We went to
technology.
every town in Vermont.
Next up, it looks like we have Randall's report. Well-written report. I believe there's one question from Randall to the board, correct?
I'll move closer to the mic. Well, the question is interesting because it dovetails with the village discussion, which is when I had this conversation with the Deputy Commissioner of Housing, they had mentioned, nothing concrete, but there was the idea that there was this roughly $60 million that was going to be allocated, and it was going to be allocated specifically for Lamoille County, and that they would love to see a project in Johnson. But that's the same money that the village is talking about relative to the wastewater. Because that money could also be used for housing as well. But it was prioritized for Moyle County, it was prioritized for flood impacted communities. So I guess I'm saying if, you know, I still think there's value in having either the deputy commissioner or the commissioner or both talk to the board, because they can also speak to things not related to that specific pool of money. They can also talk about some of the governor's proposed legislation for infrastructure funding, et cetera. They can just make the board aware of those opportunities and talk a little more about them as well. I know they have a new proposal for a kind of mini TIF district. I think they're calling it the Spark. I don't remember, it's an acronym for something. I don't know.
Acronyms in the state, I never would have
The
guessed.
Spark one, you know, that's a catchy one. Anyway, they could come and talk about that. So that the only thing in there was just, you know, again, it's sort of like this. Are you interested in that? And if you are, I can reach out and kind of make that happen if you like.
How does the board feel? I'm interested personally, but
In sparking one up.
let's spark it.
My only concern is, Randall, is to not compete with the village sewage treatment plant money.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. That was only part of the impetus of it. They can speak to other things. And again, I can talk to them and just maybe find out a little more about it. But there's, like I said, there's still a number of other things they can speak to beyond just that particular allocation.
Yeah.
Fund.
Okay.
So,
Just,
right.
we gave them our love and
Yes.
blessing.
Yep. Yes.
I too would be interested in having a visitor presentation.
And you're not against it? You too?
Yeah, I'm not, absolutely not against it. I guess the caveat that I have on all of these things is Mark alluded to it earlier in the evening. The funding for a lot of these things is either gonna disappear or be clawed back. So, you know, we may not, best of intentions out there with all of these programs, but there may not actually be any money out there. But by all means,
You're good with it, Mike?
Yeah, fine with it.
So yes, the select board would be interested in meeting with the deputy commissioner or the commissioner
All right.
for housing. Anything else in the report other than the industrial part, because that is kind of our next item, so we can kind of bring things back.
One thing I just wanted to flag, since Charles is here, you know, the piece about Charles forming this 501c3 has been great. It's been really interesting. You know, like I said, we've been having conversations. We had a conversation with the folks from Newport. We're going to set up further conversations. We have a conversation that was scheduled with Gary Holloway from the state to discuss a designated downtown status, which we might qualify for. And if we did, that has a whole host of benefits that we'll find out more about when we talk to them. But basically, the idea is, if you didn't quite understand it, is that Charles is forming this sort of like a downtown development group, similar to what Johnson Works was, but a little more focused on tourism and marketing in Johnson. So he wants to form this 501c and develop a really image-rich, beautiful marketing website, really focused, I think, mostly on recreation will be the real central focus, the recreational assets, which will dovetail with the work that the VCRB Recreation Group is doing. And so Charles and I have been in conversation back and forth about all of this, funding sources and ideas, and again, mostly talking to other communities that have these sort of separate nonprofits, and how does the nonprofit interact or not with municipal government? How do you do your best to stay coordinated and on message with each other so that you're not at odds with each other, et cetera. So our conversation with Newport was very helpful. We're probably going to set up one with St. Johnsbury as well, and just get a sense of how they do it, and how do you negotiate that municipal government, because he's not a municipal committee, so he can set up his website and do whatever he wants. But obviously, he's got, he and I are already in a really good spot of just like, we want to make sure that we're pulling in the same direction. So just wanted to flag that.
I had a question with regard to you mentioned in your report that it might enable us to obtain a designated downtown status.
Yep.
How so?
Well, because I believe one of the qualifications for designated downtown is that you have to have that sort of nonprofit in order to get that status. That's part of the criteria for forming, getting having the nonprofit.
Did the village have a designated?
There's a designated village center. This is different.
The village center is a different designation, and the village has in the past been reluctant to pursue the downtown designation. So I guess I'm throwing it out there that I don't know who you want to spearhead this thing, but if the majority of the economic activity is in the village, and they have a designated village center, should you have conversations with the trustees about expanding that to a designated downtown center?
Right. This will all follow after we talk with Gary Holloway, that he can give us all the details. And it may be just like with the historic preservation issue that I brought back to you guys at one point. I said, oh, this is a good idea. You all sort of determined, actually, really, that would be more of a village thing. I flagged it for the village. I reminded the village did not decide to pursue that. So it could end up in that same situation where we make them aware that there's this opportunity. We make them aware that we could qualify should they decide to pursue it, and et cetera, and the village might just say, we're not interested.
They might, and I would just, if that is the case, I would just suggest that you bring it back to the town, because unless I'm greatly mistaken, the village is a incorporated village within the town of Johnson, and the town of Johnson might be able to pursue designated downtown center regardless of what the village might want to do in that regard. I don't know if that's the case, and after you've had your conversation with Mr. Holloway.
I'll remember it, but I'm just gonna write it down to ask in the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably worth, having that question at least answered.
Duncan, who could answer what your initial question about? I agree with you. I think the village is an entity within the town, and we can make decisions, not for the village, but for
the town.
For the town,
A case in point is form-based code.
right?
The town adopted form-based code, not the village.
So you're comfortable that that is true? We can really.
We could research it a little more.
I think it would be well worth, having the conversation with the downtown. There's an actual group at the state that deals with designated downtowns.
Morrisville and Morristown, I think they used to be in that situation.
Yes. But they're actually pursuing a downtown designation right now. And the reason that they lost it was they actually didn't have an approved
Municipal plan.
municipal plan. They didn't have regional approval for their municipal plan.
Are there any other questions for Randall on his report? Like I said, kind of minus the industrial part, because it's its own.
Do you have any, it looks like April is when that community assistance plan might be coming forward.
The FEMA?
Yeah, the FEMA one.
Yeah, FEMA
I set up
communities.
another meeting with Mark Lease, but the last meeting that we had, that seemed to be the horizon, was sort of April, when he thought that the team might be moving on. There's a lot of uncertainty in general with them, but it seemed like he was, and like I said, he distributed at this VCRD related meeting, he distributed to some of the folks there, I would call it a draft plan, but I would say I wouldn't call it a draft plan. I would say it was more like a structure for the plan. There was a lot of material filled in, but a lot of the meat was still not there, and he was soliciting input from them to cover some of the community related stuff in there. But it's progressed quite a bit. You know, April seemed like a reasonable, based on what was in that document. I would think that April could, you know, get part of it.
How do we think that the VCRD Reimagine Johnson report and that report are going to mesh?
They're going to mesh a lot, and I actually am going to flag with him just some concern that right now, as it stands, it feels like it's almost too congruent. You know, it's very much going to be, at this stage, it's sort of very much populated with material from VCRD, which I think is good and important, but I think that I feel like there should be more outside of that process, like more infrastructure related things that weren't necessarily talked about there. So that's why I'm hoping to meet with them and just say, you know, I'd like to see more things in there than just those things.
Yeah, but I candidly will say that I was hoping we would see more of a specific plan for action.
Yeah, no, I believe there will be that, and he has said numerous times, you know, that they have, again, I don't know where things stand now, but that they have a staff person who, once all of the projects are identified, whose job it is basically to identify sources of federal funding for various, or potential sources of federal funding, I should say, for those various projects.
Yep.
It's probably outside the business of the meeting, but I would be happy to talk with you about bringing some life into the housing group, which has faded.
Yeah. You all were not at the last meeting.
Nope.
You housing people.
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. That probably is an outside the meeting conversation.
Sorry.
Next up is the industrial park. I see that from your report. I know it kind of links, but still industrial park. Where did I see it? One item flag is the state apparently is shifting their guidance on prime ag mitigation. Do you have any more details on that, or kind of waiting for info? I guess where I'm going from is I believe we had talked about this way back when, and we had said that, you know, there is land for offsite mitigation. And then the original estimate we carried,
40.
Lumley recommended 40, but they had revised it April 23rd.
Yeah.
And said that probably wouldn't be needed because we did have land that would probably be offsite mitigation. Fit the box, check the box.
For ag.
For prime ag mitigation.
I think they said that it wasn't going to be required, didn't they?
That's what I thought too.
Yes, that was, so this is the issue. They had conversations with state folks, and they believe that they could say with confidence that it was not going to be necessary. They now say that the state is shifting the conversation that they are having. Like I said, it doesn't rule out the possibility of offsetting, as you said, like that's still a possibility. Or one of the things that was discussed is if you're not wanting to say, well, you know, you told us 40, you said not to consider the 40, and we don't want to step back in and come up with 40, you know, as part of our project cost. And one of the options then is to build those into the cost of lots. When you sell the lots, you can distribute the cost across the lots and just say when the lot's purchased, X number of dollars of that cost of that lot's going to go to offset those fees.
How in the world can we ever get anything done in this state. Really. This is absolutely ridiculous.
It's the state for you.
I tell you, it's, talk about a cumbersome mess. Too bad we didn't talk about that to the treasurer about this evening. I mean, he doesn't have much to do with it, but at least we could vet it to him.
Yeah.
You know, good grief.
One option that I don't think you mentioned, but I would suggest is that we, through our engineer or whoever, we need to push back hard on the Agency of Agriculture and say, yes, said, we're relying on information you provided us, and now you're changing, seemingly, even though we haven't submitted an actual application. We're relying on good faith information that you provided us, that it was not gonna be expensive, and we expect you to honor that arrangement.
Right, and they have, if you recall, there was a similar thing that happened with historic preservation related item where they had conversations and they had been told it's gonna be fine. Then I walked the property with someone from historic preservation, and again, even in that conversation, it seemed like it was gonna be fine. But then when I got the email, they're like, oh, we think you're gonna need to do X, Y, and Z review, here's your consultants. And in that instance, the engineering firm did exactly as you said. They pushed back and they said, look, we had this conversation, we had this conversation, we had this conversation, and that pushback was successful. That doesn't mean it will be in this case, but it has happened in the past. And I don't, Lumley is, they don't just take it at face value and then just roll with it. They will push back.
This current climate in the state of Vermont, it would take 500 years to build the interstate. If you could do it at all.
Probably, but one other question I had about the industrial park, and I guess, because there's nothing listed specifically in our next steps, when would we go out and fill out the bond application? Timing wise, general question to just about anybody in the room.
Well, I didn't hear what.
We went to the voters for a bond, they approved it, but when do we fill out the application, receive the funds? When do we need that cash to continue so that the project's not being held up because we said, oh crap, we should have done the bond last month? I don't need an answer tonight. It's just if Randall, Tom, Rosemary, I'm not sure who would have the answer.
I would run it 3 ways, right? We have the tax anticipation reserve fund. And how town government works is you operate in arrears. So you pay bills and then you pay yourself back with taxes. And the tax anticipation reserve fund protects that. That way we're not paying interest. That's kind of like we're borrowing against ourselves. We have a very large set of reserves right now. And I think the way to do it is to borrow against yourself as long as you can. And so the absolute last thing you do, so that we'll pay $300,000 of bills before we then go to bond. And I think the other thing that we could do is piggyback this with a line of credit. You'd email earlier about that today. But we're probably gonna need a line of credit for the same reason, because we have 4 other large projects happening all at once, where we might need overlap between the expense of Holmes Meadow excavation. It's gonna be several $100,000, but it's 100% reimbursed, but there's probably gonna be a 6-week lag. We have bills at the library that are probably gonna be several $100,000. Again, 6 weeks overlap, but it's 100% reimbursed. We have the same with the Vermont Electric Co-op and their stormwater project. There's a $400,000 bill we're gonna have to pay, but we need 6 weeks to get it back. If we had a line of credit for as much as we could use that line of credit to borrow against ourselves till taxes. And so that way we're only paying interest on what we absolutely need until we're absolutely ready to spend that $500,000 for the bond, $590. And then you bond, it's probably gonna be 60 days is the average closing. So we prepare that for 60 days before we're gonna run out of money, and then we apply for the bond. And we just have all contractors and all invoices on bar, aware that like, here's our cash flow. So we can't pay you until this is reimbursed. Are you still willing to do the work or do you want to wait? And that way, if every contractor for every project is on, I'm already telling everybody at every meeting I have that we have this cash flow, that we need 6 weeks between this and with this. So every delay with a permit, the contractor's aware that, okay, we're good. You know, that makes sense. So as long as we give ourselves 60 days for a bond, we'll be okay. But I think we should borrow against ourselves and use the line of credit to pay the least amount of interest. Because the minute you take that bond out, you're paying interest.
Yeah, the bond payment was weird because you got us schedules. It was an interest only payment. And then
kind of sandwiched, yeah, two.
and then an interest and principal payment.
Yeah. How does it?
Great recommendation. Like I said, I don't need like a concrete answer tonight. I just want to make sure.
And how does it factor in, Tom? We have, you know, a few $100,000 allocated to this project already.
In
Yeah, like
our grant,
550,000.
in our grant match reserve fund.
Yeah.
Well,
Correct? That's where
right, but it's specifically for.
it was
Yeah.
allocated for this
Yeah.
project.
So that feels like that should buy cash flow.
The part I don't understand about the industrial park, and I think we actually brought it up at another meeting and I forgot the answer, that's on me. But 50% of this, we're gonna get reimbursed. So do we pay the first 800,000 and then get,
Basically, as you submit invoices, you pay the full, whatever the invoice is. You submit it to them, they send you a check for half of it. Is the way that
okay,
works.
okay.
Which is a lot easier than having to pay rents.
That's what I didn't understand.
So
All right,
it's
thank
like,
you.
it's progressive, I guess. They're just reimbursing you for half
They were-
at each step.
At each step, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's a lot less burdensome than having to float the whole
So
thing.
that 500,000 should take us 3/4 of the way through the project until the construction phase. I mean, until the major phase of the road construction.
It, depending on how the reimbursements come in, unless you get like a huge piece right up front, but if they're relatively, you know, distributed.
But with any luck, once they get started, we're gonna be getting hit with big bills pretty fast.
That's why I think cash flow is gonna be our biggest. And I think being so tight with every contractor. This summer, it looks like we're gonna have Lenway Lane construction in October is where it was. We're gonna have library. And then those are 100% reimbursed. So if we just put out those big bills, we just tell every bill that comes, we're anticipating during that 6-week reimbursement period. You talk with the contractor and you say, as soon as we get reimbursed for X, we'll pay you. Do you want to wait? You know, so that we can have those conversations and if everyone's aware, the expectation is clear. So far, it hasn't been a problem. But, so we have library summer, we have Holmes Meadow. It's unclear when that's gonna take place because of the archaeology needed. But that might be this summer or might be next. And then we have VEC Stormwater that's also this summer. We might want to do some strategic planning with this to get us ready, shovel ready. So that way this goes out, construction starts May 1st of 26 on the industrial park versus, so it's all bidded, ready to go. And that way that all these 3 projects this summer, we're not worrying on that overlap. We have 3 months to catch up, right, for those reimbursements. And then we have better cash flow. And then Holmes Meadow would be the same. You know, we're just, that way if we can work that out so we can focus on 3 this summer and make sure those get done. And then we have a winter to catch up for reimbursements. Then we can have that cash flow next summer.
But at this point, we don't have an Act 250 approval on the industrial park, so it's almost a moot point.
I mean, we had the Lenway Lane, we thought we were gonna have shovels in the ground in March. And like, we had a meeting with A&R, they now won. We have to do studies on mussels and.
Oh, for crying out loud. Here we go again.
We're going down a rabbit hole
Yeah.
based on my question. And you know, you had mentioned that we had emailed about a line of credit earlier today, and Tom and I did email about it. I'm not wholeheartedly against the line of credit, you know, as long as we're doing everything we can to reduce interest. And I probably would rely heavily on Rosemary saying, we're gonna need a line of credit for X amount, and hoping that you guys are working together, you all know
Yeah, we have to show
the costs that are,
deficit spending for the bank to get a line of credit.
we have to show what,
Deficit spending to get a line of credit.
so we have to spend down before we can even take one, or,
We have, for 12 months, we gotta show our income, estimated income and estimated expenses.
okay,
Whatever the deficit is, we gotta add those projects in.
gotcha. I'm sure we'll talk about probably cash flow more in future meetings. I don't wanna bog down tonight with it. I appreciate everybody in here watching it. I'm trying to play catch up just for my own knowledge, not for,
As much as initially I laid out a plan, but as much as you plan for this, every permit,
right?
like right now we're playing a shell game of which project's gonna happen first. And it's,
They're all gonna happen in the end, so
Right.
it's,
yeah,
The end of what?
is there any other updates on the industrial park that we need to know?
I mean, just that there's a meeting tomorrow, with, the clerk group, and the clerk group are the consultants that NBRC uses to sort of double check the work that Mumley's doing. To basically review whether it's gonna meet, regulatory standards or not. So we're having that meeting tomorrow, which is more like it's like an initial conversation. And it'll be interesting because it will also kind of, it'll be kind of it'll be a good check on the progress that Mumley's made, essentially, and what level of preparation Mumley has relative to what these folks want to see. It could be that they come in, every question they have, Mumley has a ready answer for it, it's good to go. Great. Or it could be that they ask a bunch of questions and Mumley's not prepared to answer them, and that would not be great.
Yeah,
And
certainly.
if that's the case, then just make things more protracted. So it's gonna be an interesting one.
For sure.
This whole project's costing twice as much as it was when we originally looked at this like 14 years ago, right?
Yeah, that was 14 years ago.
Yeah. Two and a half times as much. It still hasn't hardly got anywhere yet. Sometimes I begin to wonder, I think it's a waste of time.
There's movement. Thank you very much, Randall. Next up, we have the library. You wanna take that away, Tom?
yeah, I'm not sure, pretty much the update is in the packet, if you'd like, I can,
You had a meeting today with library folks?
we did, we met with the library and the architect today to go over a third set of plans. The library is working with the architect to work on the interior layout, flow. The basic consensus is that they want the front of the building, which is the historic part, to be a community space, to have evening access so that the town could use it for town events, for lectures, for whatever, just a community room, the old part would be just a large open area with an art facility, so that way it could be used after hours with us, but also part of the library during the day, but then be able to be closed off at night, so that way you can use that facility outside of library hours, which is really, it created a slew of problems, but I think it's money well spent, and that we're gonna end up with a great multi-use facility.
It's the existing brick part of the building.
Yeah, kind of what the children's reading room is in the back right, it's gonna be like an art area, and then the rest of it is gonna be, the back left would be, I think, bathrooms, and then the vaulted part is gonna be wide open. It's just kind of a big community space that you can hold for lectures, for, movie showing, whatever you want, it's kind of to be part of the community, which is really great, because we're missing that right now in town, so. And then the other push is really pushing, I think, the big takeaway from today, I haven't quite wrapped my head around on, is the building scheduled to move either the weekend of April 19th or the following week. And for that to happen, the architectural drawings are required before we can put the project out to bid for a general contractor. Which is okay, but we're kind of running up against this deadline. The building's gonna roll into a hole, and then we'll pour concrete up to it. One of the problems with that is we might have to I've been keeping things going, moving forward by calling contractors to get them, just keeping people in the loop, kind of waiting for this general contractor to take over. I think we're probably gonna have to put concrete out to bid ourselves. If we don't, we have 45 days from April 19th to pour that new foundation, or else we start paying that $600 a day fee.
For the crib.
That's right, yeah, so but I think we could put the concrete out to bid ourselves, and then if we put the GC out later, we just pass it off to the GC to say, okay, hey, this is where we are to take over. The cost of waiting could be exorbitant, so.
I thought we talked about that fee and you had said that the building mover, as long as there was a plan in place, is fine. He's not gonna
Well,
charge
this
us
is,
that.
so I think that part of that plan is if we don't have a plan, which we don't now, if we put it out to bid for concrete and the concrete company says, yep, we'll do it June 15th, then we could say, okay, the concrete's coming on June 15th. That's working together because we have an agreement and a plan.
Yeah.
But what he doesn't want is him to roll the building into a hole and have no idea when he can pull his steel out. So that's why if we can put that concrete out to bid, get something on the schedule and get a price, then the rest of the project budget moves forward. But it's kind of, I think we do need to do that ourselves, and that's.
Have you been pushing the architect? Is he got the concrete plans?
We're working, I have a phone number today to work with. Andrew was retained for NES, New England Structural Engineering is doing that piece.
Okay.
He wants to do a geotechnical survey, and I think, so I have a phone call to him tomorrow to just say, yeah, look, we have a timeline, what does it take? If we wait for a geotechnical survey, we're gonna have to spend $13,000 on the survey, plus it's gonna cost X number of days and fines. What if we just build to conservative amount, the money that we would spend on all of that time in your survey, why don't we just build it once to conservative measures? And then we can move on, rather than spending the money to a survey and spending the money in fines to then build a bigger foundation. Why don't we just build a bigger foundation now? And so that's what that conversation tomorrow is about, is like, how do we move this project along? And so that's where that's coming. And from that conversation will be the concrete's designed by him. So it's not a hard bid for us to put out. There's gonna be specs, there's gonna be layout, there's gonna be number of yards, and then we can just push it forward. And as soon as we get that, I'm also gonna start pushing some procuring donations for the foundation from various companies in hopes that we can have that part settled.
Do we own the land yet?
Haven't really thought about it.
The land is scheduled to be transferred April 1st. But the school has agreed to sign off on any permitting or anything required until that, so. The survey was completed and both the attorneys have it, and everyone's pretty copacetic at this point.
Okay. Any questions about the library from the board?
I moved it to the June date.
Next up, RFP for clerk of the works. Tom, you said you were gonna get with Peter and have more information. What's that more information?
I have received nothing.
That's riveting information.
Yeah.
Very good.
So, but I still think it's worth having a clerk of the works, and maybe we just reopen.
What about the possibility of advertising for a clerk of the works rather than putting out an RFP?
I'm calling her, yeah.
You mean like newspaper, or we're talking
Good old fashioned newspaper.
Good old-
Facebook?
Facebook, webpage, you name it, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Newspaper, right?
I mean, for what it's worth, you could probably get a hold of Procore or something. They might have a list.
It's a little frustrating because we had interest and they said on 2 different occasions they would get it to us, they would get it to us, they would get it to us, and they didn't, so. I could put it out, the Vermont bid registry is extremely responsive, so if you want, I can put it out on that, and that would certainly bring in.
I think you've got a great basis. The RFP provides a great basis for putting together an ad.
Yeah,
I mean, the basic ad can be Town of Johnson seeks clerk of the works. Contact Tom Gallinat for details, and then
Yeah,
the detail can be that,
So do we need a formal motion to reopen it?
I don't think so.
I would,
Can we reject all bids we never received?
you don't need to. I would make a motion that we advertise a clerk of the works position for the library job.
There's a motion on the
Second.
floor and a second. Is there further discussion? Are you given a dollar figure cap? Just advertise.
I'm just saying advertise and seek an hourly rate.
I'll put it on VLCT, I'll put it on, the Vermont bid registry. Do you think it's worth the News and Citizen? I think VLCT and the bid registry will hit the major companies that do this. Do you want News and Citizen for retired? The clerk of the works for this building, I called and they just aren't interested, who built this building.
Maybe, but every time I go to the post office, I think half the News and Citizen are in the trash, but.
Um,
Well, actually, a lot of people look at it online.
Yeah, that's true.
there's a lot of online views. I would say throw it in the News and Citizen.
I would
Alright,
too.
Peter?
That's the
If for
only
no
one.
other reason.
Okay,
That's
so
the
there's,
only one that's gonna cost money.
there's consensus there. Is there any further
It's not
discussion?
gonna cost that much.
All those in favor with that motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. I think that ends the clerk of the work conversation. But thank you. Next up, LCPC liaison post-town meeting. They don't want Mark anymore.
Mark, I would feel really bad about that if I were you.
I am fine.
So
What does the liaison with LCPC do?
Yeah, good question.
We have a board member for
Why isn't
LCPC.
What was it for?
I don't know. That was something,
Apparently, it's really important.
Something you signed me up for, as a matter of fact, I think.
yeah, this was back when we had all these projects happening in town. LCPC wanted a connection to the board.
You never reached out to me.
Was it for MTAP or?
This was just when we were doing all the buyout properties. There was
How's the board? feel?
Reimagine Johnson. There was like all this stuff happening and like LCPC wanted to make sure there was a connection between them and the select board.
Do they feel like they can't communicate with select board member?
They didn't specify why, they just wanted to.
Who would the board like to appoint as our new LCPC liaison?
The new member.
I think Peter's right for the picking.
I don't understand, how come it's not done? Is that is it a conflict?
Well, I'm on the board. Maybe that would be a conflict. I don't know.
But it also is the most direct line, like it would be, I mean, you already kind of are, you know? But I mean, not to like put you in the hot seat, but.
Anybody like the idea of Peter?
Sure.
No, I think the brand new, whoever gets elected right out of the gate and say, oh, by the way.
I mean, Peter might get elected.
Yes, they don't have to do town service officer anymore.
All right.
This would be the.
This could be the village. I'm looking for a motion from the board. I am not hearing
I
one.
guess it would be really nice to know exactly what it is that they're
Yeah, let's get it up.
looking.
Could we ask our current LCPC liaison to communicate with LCPC and get an understanding of what the liaison's
Yes, that's a good
responsibilities are?
idea.
That's a smart idea.
All right, so I guess we have one more meeting before town meeting, but we'll probably deal with this after town meeting. Cause that meeting should be heavy town meeting only, with very minimal excess. So our current LCPC liaison is gonna liaison with LCPC and figure out what that
Find out
is.
what they want. Get a job description.
All right, it's all you.
I'm on it.
Next,
How many meetings and what kind of time?
I
and
mean,
all that?
Mark's done it for 2 years and he doesn't know what the position
Yeah,
is.
that tells you right there. They have never reached out.
How's the college liaison?
But they don't want you to continue.
Clearly, they found out. Yeah, same with the college. The college has never said a word to me.
Do you feel comfortable reaching out to him and getting some clarity?
I will get that clarity from them.
All right, Next up, village water bill for the ice rink.
I got a question for Randall while he's still here.
Randall's gonna be here until item 20.
Okay,
Can I,
I'll ask later then.
back to also a liaison to the village, so like so there are 2 liaisons in number 12.
And village.
And village liaison. Who's our current village liaison?
You are,
I don't think we have it.
the 2 chairs, what's wrong with that?
I
Have you been
have
liaison?
not had many experiences where Ken has questions. He doesn't feel uncomfortable reaching out with me and vice versa.
I think it's more of a public face, so then it's like, okay, if there's
Where's this request coming from?
LCPC.
LCPC is requesting us to appoint a liaison with the village. Maybe the village needs one. I'm assuming that they're looking for a village liaison to LCPC,
I think
not
it
a
was-
town select board member liaison to the village.
What if we just leave it at the 2 chairs and we're done, and then
Sure. Beauty. Board comfortable with that?
Yep.
Hearing no objections, we're gonna move on to the water bill. For the ice rink.
I move that we pay the village $553.22. That's including the $453.22 for the call out and $100 for the water per the agreement with the town and the village for a $100 flat fee for the ice rink yearly.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can you, are we
We're under further discussion.
further discussion?
Yeah,
Can
Peter,
you,
second.
I know we had the conversation, so I know, but can you, for the benefit of everybody else, indicate what the basis of the 432? I understand the $100, the flat fee.
Okay, well, anyway, there was a call out. That there were 2 employees that checked out the alarm at the reservoir. And so there was 1 employee for 3 hours, because it was after hours at $120.93 per hour, then 1 employee for 1 hour, or a part of an hour, I guess it was, for $90.44. I'm looking at their itemized bill here. So we had overtime, we had 1 regular hour, and we had 3 overtime hours. So that comes up to $453.22.
Okay, so
And
that's,
so that's a call out. And so we can't really get around a call out because people were called out to investigate this. So, and then that's what I'm making the motion for, the call out plus the $100.
Which is their typical water fee.
Water fee, it has been like
the
years.
$100 flat fee.
Flat fee.
So there's a motion and a second. I believe we're beyond further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Good luck.
Who's gonna communicate this to the village? Or are we just gonna pay the bill as presented by the board?
I have a note to talk with Eric tomorrow.
Okay.
Because you guys have been doing the talking.
Correct.
Pardon me.
All right,
I don't mind talking.
maybe. Next up is town meeting prep. Is there anything from anybody else? I did send out a list of, potential topics. It's not a perfect list. Something's gonna come up that's not on it. One thing, I'm not sure if you've been in communication with Dave. We gotta make sure he recommends the motion or asks the floor if you're allowed to speak. I just wanna flag that.
Yes, that every town meeting,
Well, Tom's only been to one.
but in general, yeah.
He didn't ask that when Brian was here.
Brian lives in Johnson.
Exactly. Dave does a very good job. I'm not suggesting he would forget or anything.
Yeah, it was dead when I was there, because I didn't live in, well, when I didn't live in Johnson, he did it.
Don't ask the question then. I was just trying to make sure we're
Yeah.
covered and I apologize if I offended
Yeah.
anybody.
It's one of those things where
I
one
feel board
person
meetings that-
objects, you can't. speak.
Huh?
Ask them before.
Can I-
For town meeting prep, can I make one request?
Hey, guys,
I don't know if other people want this, but you had indicated that I want, my understanding is Evan is gonna do like the broad overview of the budget. One board member is gonna move the article, another's gonna second it, and then there'll be discussion. And my understanding is if there are specific budget questions, that I might be tasked with answering some of those questions.
some of them,
Okay.
yes.
So what I would request would be an 11 by 17 copy of the budget plus all the backup sheets.
Can the full board get?
Yeah, I'm guessing maybe everybody wants that.
I love highlights, as you know. Do you want me to highlight the cells to the person to answer them? So like Duncan gets all green, so if somebody asks about whatever, you want me to do that to match what your request, or is that too complicated?
I don't personally need that. I mean,
Yeah, I don't think I do either.
sometimes, a question will be asked and
You might.
And
have to
more
end up
than
answering
one
some.
board member might have some information that they
Yeah.
think answers it adequately. This isn't a hard and fast list. It's just something that we've done since Beth has been here.
Yeah.
And it works well if the
Well,
topic comes
Eric
up.
always did it too.
Yeah.
So does everybody want the full size of the full size, the 11 by 17?
one.
I want a 36 by 48.
We can do it. We have the ink.
11
That's exactly it.
by 17 for sure. Just,
Perfect.
We're not fine.
yeah. Peter?
I keep meaning to get back to you about the list of people attached to topics. I never was the liaison or whatever we're calling it to the rail trail. So I'm not qualified to.
Were you on the rail trail committee?
Hmm.
Well, we can shift that to somebody else.
Is Randall
Randall's-
gonna be there? Cause he probably has more information than all of us.
Are you gonna be at town meeting,
I
Randall?
plan on being there, yes.
For real? Sweet.
Better.
But I don't know, I mean, I can answer broad strokes, I can't answer with any detail about the rail trail. That would
Right.
be a rail trail committee.
Yeah,
I-
if there are really specific questions, I would say Doug Moldy. is-
He'll be in
And
there.
there'll be other people from each committee there if there's finite questions.
I think grant related is probably Randall and everything else Doug, right?
I don't see
For
what the
the
deal
rest.
is, because it's always used to be the chair, would answer every question.
Yeah, that was when we had Beth, she was really sharp and then.
No, Eric answered every
Eric and
question.
Beth.
Beth didn't answer every question.
Eric did.
Literally, I took Beth's list that she sent out to all of us from last year and embellished it.
Yeah.
That's it.
You didn't notice him pulling your leg. Did you
I
feel that tug under?
can
the
never
chin?
tell because he's too far behind me.
I don't remember a lot of questions last year, people asking. We're gonna be so busy with that Rosemary's business with the town clerk and
I
the
was-
treasurer.
I was gonna ask, are you comfortable speaking on that
Yeah, I'll write something up.
topic a little bit?
And then we're gonna have to listen to the legislators.
You said it,
Thought
you
that
said,
was-
At lunch,
yeah, we're gonna be busy stuffing pizza.
yeah.
You can't let that go.
Is there anything else you've heard from? Typically, I think in the past, some of the office staff goes over and sets up the room the night before.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
The highway crew.
Wi-Fi is we're getting our own card, set up for, like, the elections will have Wi-Fi access, and then probably if you bring your laptop, you can have Wi-Fi access in case you need to get anything.
I'll need it, for sure. I know Wi-Fi was on my list of questions because when we did the bond, we'd ask the question, let's make sure Wi-Fi is good, and we ended up running off my phone.
Is Green Mountain TV gonna record it?
I don't know, I'll ask them,
You were there last year.
Mhm.
but, Wi-Fi is already in the works.
Yeah, you've got me on a lot of things. I'm looking at the list right now.
First time you've looked at it, Mark.
I have looked at it.
We had the violin players this year. Anybody heard?
I want Hard Rock.
No, both. We have Boy Scouts.
Boy Scouts are
We
coming,
do have Boy Scouts.
got the Boy Scouts,
That's good.
That's
but
great.
we want the violin players.
Fiddlers.
Gary.
They probably call themselves violin
We're
players.
gonna,
Gary.
That's why I didn't say fiddlers.
we'll talk about this significantly more at the next meeting, but is there anything anybody wants to say, plans we should be made? Rosemary probably knows more about town meeting than
I was thinking fiddlers.
everybody here combined. Are we in good shape?
I think we're in good shape.
Our
Historical
increases,
Historical Society's bringing pies.
our increase is lower than Hyde Park, so maybe we won't be.
When do we want to, I know there was a request, was it you that brought us the request that people, the committees might want a couple minutes to talk about their committee?
All he has to do is announce that, the moderator,
Yeah,
because it's right at the very beginning of every town meeting.
sure.
Anyway, and we just need to tell him what we talked about. If anybody on any of the town committees has something to say, you can say it now.
Would that be right at the
Beginning,
accepting the reports of?
yeah, it's number 3, I believe.
Yeah,
So,
good spot for it.
and I told some of them that, this isn't gonna be a big dissertation, this is just gonna be a little plug. That you don't need to stand there and talk for half an hour on your committee.
I think there's gonna be some discussion about the grocery store. Yeah, there's still a lot of people in town.
Yeah.
I got the list up right there.
Who got the grocery store?
Dunkin' has the grocery store. You feel like you have a sense of grocery store world? This is a man.
I go to the grocery store once every couple of weeks.
Cause it was on the news again last night.
I went to Hanover's today, actually.
People buy up our.
Who'd they give
I was
buyouts
on
to?
Vermont Digger this morning too.
Tom,
Did I?
We had a little fun to the meeting.
we're having pizza.
Such as what, Peter?
Are you preparing a dance or
That
something
would
dance?
be entertainment. We had a conversation today and Tom had an idea.
Is there something we could do for like camaraderie, kind of like, lighten the mood, but also do something that brings us together? Maybe we all wear fake mustaches, pretend nothing's wrong with it. Or like, all wear plaid shirts.
We're
you know,
all,
maybe
how
like-
about we all shave our head?
Perfect. But whatever it is, but just pretend like nothing's wrong, just do something fun, and like, is there anything that we wanna do to like, there's been a lot of dissent in town and like, let's like pull it all back together and like, let's, what does it mean to be, Johnson? And there's nothing, you're the flag of the town, the municipality is the pulse of the community and, what do you want that pulse to be?
Stodgy old guys.
Yeah, just want to be South Dakota. Well, why don't we all wear plaid shirts
We
like
got
Mike?
that covered.
How many people own a Vermont flannel shirt?
One that are not so
Yeah,
Not me.
I'm not wealthy enough to own one of those things, Mike. I have to
You
borrow
buy 'em-
yours.
You buy them used on eBay. It's the only way you can afford it. Okay, so the deal is, that's how I get my shirts. They're like brand new. I got a brand new one in the package a while ago for $30 delivered. Must have been given as a gift for somebody and they didn't want it and they sold it.
They got to
Would
be.
you guys
So
also
that's
send
how
me
you
your
gotta get 'em.
size? Send me your size and I'll go to Vermont Flannel and see if they'll donate shirts for everybody. Yeah, 5 shirts.
A double extra large.
Yep, one for if everyone's at.
They all have to be the same.
Yep, exactly.
And get the Vermont pattern.
Why can't we get,
It's called the Vermont pattern.
why can't we get Green Mountain flannel? That's made at Johnson Selectboard, isn't it?
Maybe Gene would give us shirts.
Well,
This is a Johnson Woolen Mill flannel shirt. But
But
it needs
I
to
tell you
be,
what,
All right.
it needs to be played.
Gene has done a lot for the community, so why don't we ask Gene?
let's ask him.
Yeah, let's ask him. And get one for Rosemary too.
Rosemary and Randall. If he's gonna be up, he's gonna be there. He needs to
All right.
represent.
They have a red, white, and blue one, I think, at Johnson Flannel on Johnson Wool. It's a Johnson flannel shirt, and I think it's like red, white, and blue. So it's kind of a patriotic one.
So
We can all have those.
I like it.
Okay, that's a great thing to research. Gene will do it in a heartbeat.
And like, are you guys all, copacetic with the idea of wearing something?
Oh, sure.
I mean, I just think it would change the tone of the room and really, I think it would be great.
And I tell you what, it would be great advertising and talk about something that's gonna make the news.
Yep, and we could all wear a hat with a feather in it too.
That's right. Everybody, but you gotta go to a yard sale, and get one for $1.
Alright,
So what's the gift policy, for,
$25.
so the shirts are probably gonna be worth more than
value is
Just FYI.
subjective, right?
Well,
$25. We're not keeping them.
yeah, we're not, they
We're not
say,
keeping them.
That's true.
Give them back to
We'll
you.
just wear them,
Put them on
eBay.
give them back.
Technically, you're not supposed to even take a pen from a salesman.
well, we'll make a spot in the office downstairs and we'll hang 7 shirts in a row.
There you go.
And every select board meeting, you go downstairs and you put on your new shirt.
I don't know.
It is a good idea,
I
but
think
maybe we shouldn't do it.
Because of the gift for it?
The gift.
Well, as long as you don't.
Randall's right.
How much do they cost?
$120.
What? American dollars?
$120 for a Johnson flannel
Johnson
shirt.
Mill, yeah, there's.
What do they cost on eBay?
I saw, there's a real nice one on there right now for $28.
Oh, my God.
They have cheaper ones.
Well,
I was
Just like them.
I was
Well,
just there
you know,
last week.
Seriously, couldn't we borrow it? Borrow them?
Or,
We'll figure something out.
yeah, we'll work through it, even if we have to buy it and return it. Something, we'll figure it out.
That's true. We could buy it and return it.
Or buy it and make it your uniform for the year, so that's your select board outfit all
Yeah,
year.
individual board members should buy their own if they wanna do something. like
Given, given what we get.
I'll buy it.
I tell you what, we all have flannel shirts, okay? We can all just wear a flannel shirt.
Mr. Chairman, can we move on? We got a lot
yeah,
of stuff.
deal.
Make
still
sure
to
that
cover.
they're not a solid color. They all have to be kind
Yeah.
of plaid or something.
Yeah.
Alright, we'll probably have to go buy those at our next meeting. Or email Tom with ideas, he can throw ideas at the board. Deal?
I'll see if I can get it for $25 each.
Next up. Trash management.
I have a question about trash.
I have a question about trash.
You go first.
Why is it assigned for me to get emails about it?
Why, what?
Why am I receiving emails about it in the packet? I didn't recall the board making me the trash guy, but
I probably started the ball over.
you probably did. What's your question? Yours is probably an honest question.
So, what are they finding in the trash that's concerning?
Needles.
Yeah, I think you said hypodermic needles in the report.
Biohazardous waste or something?
Yeah, so I was wondering if that meant needles.
No, it also means if you go to the old mill park, they haven't emptied that in so long. Biohazard, the dog poop in the bags is pyramided up against the garbage can. The whole stuff
Wonderful.
is there. So that is a biohazard.
Yeah.
So if it needs to be picked up, I don't care how it gets done. We just need to figure that out.
You wanna,
Do you want me to go do it?
I'll do it with you.
Put it in the town.
The highway department used to do it, that's my understanding, but I don't know that for sure.
Mhm.
And I've talked to Jason and he is pretty uncomfortable.
Because he's worried about.
Needles. The village crew currently goes around and grabs the stuff on Main Street. Would you be interested in getting a price from the village to do the trash throughout town?
Do they do the,
They don't do,
Legion Field?
no, they don't do Legion Field, so all it would be adding for them is
The can at Legion Field.
Legion Field,
Old Mill Park.
Old Mill Park.
There's 2 cans there at Old Mill Park?
There's one near the playground down at the
Yeah.
end, and then there's one inside the Welcome Center. And then there's
There
also,
there
there's,
isn't one by the shed building.
I think you're getting tied up in the details. There's
Okay.
cans at Old Mill Park.
Yeah.
and then there's also, the skate park. The skate park currently hires somebody to do it, and they have their own dumpster. We could eliminate some costs by that monthly dumpster fee and,
Why don't you just figure it out?
okay, I'm happy.
They don't have good thick gloves on to pick that trash out of there?
If you directed me to say the highway department had to do it, I would work with them to make sure they had whatever PPE needed. That was another suggestion, is just. But I think I need your direction to go to the public works department and say, this is your job, you gotta do it.
If they've always done it, then they continue to do it. Make sure they have good gloves and a mask on if they feel.
And I would add that perhaps we should purchase a sharps container and put up a sign saying, please don't put your dirty needles in the trash, put it in the sharps container. Because those sharps containers have a container that you can remove and not be exposed to
I
that
think we talked
biohazard.
about that a while ago.
So, I don't blame the guys for being
Yeah.
concerned about
Yeah.
picking up a hypodermic needle.
I totally get it.
If they got accidentally pricked with one of those, that's bad, and it's a lawsuit for us. So,
But at the same time, Doctor, we can, every municipality in the country is dealing with this, and the public works crews of every municipality are picking these up.
Yes.
We gotta give them the right.
Maybe I'll reach out to
Gloves or
VLCC.
something.
absolutely, I'm not just, I wouldn't disagree with that in the least. I'm saying that an additional level of insurance would be a sharps container.
I can't
So-
imagine somebody that's throwing, around this. Oh, look, there's a place for my needle, but maybe.
You might be.
Well,
surprised.
maybe,
know.
even if they got, 25% of them, that would be 25% that they didn't have to pick up.
I'm agnostic to I think the village wants to work with the town right now. It would be really nice if they picked up our trash cans. We do tit for tat trading, right? We pushed back their banks for their sidewalks 7 times this year, right? We're not sending them a bill. They don't need to send us a bill for next shower worth of work a week. Kind of works out like a team. I'm also not against just seeing what the cost of a trash company is. What really ticks me off about that is time to budget for that was a month ago
Right.
or better, not now. But if it's cost effective, I am not close to the idea.
I'd be interested in asking them, what can we do to make them feel comfortable and safe?
We could certainly
And
reduce our cost for trash at the town garages
Mhm.
by $10,000 a year. You think?
By not offering the benefit of,
600 a month.
With the trash,
That's all that dumpster costs.
$600 a month.
We don't need that.
You don't need a dumpster at the town garage?
What's the majority of what's in that dumpster? And I understand you don't want to answer that question, but I don't think there's anything in their contract that allows for what's in the majority of that dumpster. We could probably reduce that too.
Or a bare minimum, we could have it picked up once every 2 months or something.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe that cost offset would, if we got them down to one of those 23 cubic foot containers and it's every week and the trash company goes and gets that, and what's in Old Mill Park, it's talks by Legion Field, if it costs the same, I would probably say it frees up their time. It's the same amount of money, right?
So you have.
Does the board follow what I'm
suggestions?
saying?
Yep. You have.
I was gone.
I'm just gonna repeat back. So one is talk to Jason to see if he's comfortable, purchase sharp containers and PPE. 2 is get costs for a trash company. 3 is negotiate with the village to see what work on a trade with shared labor. And 4 is removing the dumpster at the garage and using the savings to offset with an outside company to come in and grab these trash cans.
If you move that dumpsters, people are just gonna go there and put trash in.
No, remove.
Oh,
Get a
remove their dumpster.
smaller container.
Okay, for the garage. Okay.
Yeah, so I think the point you're getting at, gonna call out the elephant in the room here, is the employees get to use the trash container for their personal trash.
Maybe if we didn't have that in there, the dumpster wouldn't be as full. But, you know, if they wanna negotiate it in a future contract, they can. Right now, it's not part of the union contract, so
Right.
why are the town taxpayers picking up that tab? I don't know, the rest of the board could make a decision. I'm pointing out if there's a cost offset there, that makes sense. Saves them time for collecting trash cans, makes our employees safer and everything. I think it's a win for everybody.
Of the four, are you okay if any one of the four work out, but now trash is solved?
I mean, one of yours was just to get a cost from a trash company, right?
Well, that would be the offset of the dumpster, I guess.
It would have to be, right? If there was no cost change, right? Sure, I would pull the trigger on that in a heartbeat. I'm
Well,
sure
as
the
long
board-
And if worse comes to worse, I'll go down there and pick up the trash by the playground.
You got it.
Totally foul.
But that's a one-time offer.
It is one-time. But it's a one-time pile of trash too. I mean, it's a lot of dog food.
I hope you're not taking the Prius.
Is the board comfortable with those four potential
Yes.
solutions? You can report back to us, Tom, at our next meeting, maybe we'll figure it out.
That was scintillating.
Next up is Holmes Meadows signature authority for permitting. Tom has a suggested motion to move to authorize the select board chair, town administrator to sign all required permits for Holmes Meadow floodplain restoration project.
Motion so made.
Second.
All right, there's a motion, a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and the ayes have it. Next up,
What's gonna happen with all of that? On the corner is gonna be all pulled up, right?
not the corner, I don't believe, I mean, I haven't seen drawings for it, but the initial layout from LCPC was my first year on the board, I believe. They were talking about leaving like the trees and vegetation on the corner, but building a swath to bypass at a certain level, and those conversations, I believe I remember cutting 3 feet or cutting 5 feet. I don't know if it's
To me,
changed
it
from
would make
engineer
more
from
sense to
looking
get
at
rid
it.
of that sharp corner and then to have that kind of gradual around there, and so it wouldn't hang up. But my point is, when we were talking to the treasurer, you know, talking about land. In other words, that piece of property was deemed a floodplain and the previous owner could not develop it. Okay, so there is a house that is further up off of that property. Now, is there any possible way that we could remove some of that earth and pile it up near the old kelp mill and make some lots in there for sale? So people could build a house over there, which would be out of the 500-year floodplain.
We're certainly onto something. So that 3.5 acre lot of Holmes Meadow is not buildable, right?
That's correct.
But an estimated 24,000 cubic yards have to be removed. We have 180 acres behind the town garage shared with the village that could be potentially developed into housing. That material could go into fill. We had a discussion this morning with the architect about using some of that material to elevate the new library site. And so I think the point is valid that that material should be used to elevate areas outside of the floodplain to be even more protected or flattened or leveled or created to be habitable. I think that's very valid.
We may need to do everything we can to make that happen.
You want to be very careful about talking about putting fill on the 185 acre parcel. A pretty good portion of that is designated wetland. It's gonna give Mike apoplectic fits, but it's designated wetland. And what isn't is probably within the floodplain. Yeah, we shouldn't be filling that.
And the other option is steep
It's
hillside.
steep hillside. Where you
Yeah.
don't really need the fill.
I think the point is valid, though, that we can use, there's an asset, right? We're gonna have a bunch of free fill that we have to take out of there. Right now, it's slated to go to the gravel pit. So anywhere other than filling an old hole is a great idea.
Okay.
But I'll send that 90% design. They really are gonna cut off the corner, and they're gonna lower it 5 feet, and then a bench at 3 feet, so a 2-year floodplain. And remove that berm, which is artificial, along the edge, so the water, every 2-year storm will fill in there, and it's a place for debris flow, ice flow, and it allows water to leave the village faster. So instead of backing up at that corner into the village, it would be able to leave downstream faster.
So that corner is gonna be cut.
Cut down to about 3 to 5 feet or 3 feet. We were waiting on, archaeology did find some 4,000 year before present hearths, like a place where food was cooked. And so we have to work with that, either with screening soil or working around, so there might be some elevated areas that are undisturbed. But the basic principle is lowering that whole corner down.
Okay. We're ready to move on?
I am.
Next up, review and approve MTAP extension, which is the Municipal Technical Assistance Program, along with Signature Authority, and Tom has a recommended motion to authorize Duncan Hastings or the TA to sign the MTAP extension.
Who wants to sign it?
Okay.
Well, if you just have both, if somebody gets in a car accident tonight, we can still,
Make the
Have it
motion
signed.
either or, sign it.
I'll second.
so your motion was either or Duncan or Tom,
Tom or Duncan.
and
yeah,
you
whichever-
seconded that motion.
Whichever available.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and the ayes have it. Next up is our future committee report. Tom is recommending the beautification committee. How's the board feel?
Making a difference.
Makes sense. Yeah. Gotta think about spring planting.
Yes, big time.
Lots of sunflowers.
Rest of the board's good with that?
Yep.
All right. You got your marching orders there, Tom. Next item up is old business. Does anybody have anything for old business?
How's the Scribner Bridge coming? Did they get up and tidy that up a little bit at all, or still?
It's still open, they didn't get a chance to get it rented.
All right. Three quick items and then executive sessions. One is the Historic Society ice damming. And Tom is looking for direction from the board. What would you like to say, Tom? You had this as an addition, that's fine.
Yeah, so that email I got earlier today is, there's about a 12-inch spot of staining, the water is leaking actively. And I just don't know what, that building's kind of been a little bit of a mystery. Do you want me to take responsibility of solving that problem? And like finding somebody to take care of the ice dam? Do you want the Historical Society to do it and just keep us in the loop? Or is that something the board has done historically? I'm happy to do whatever, it's just popped up today, let's just move forward and take care of it.
It's our building. We should hire somebody to go in, and the last time it happened was a few years ago, and the fire department went in with axes and cut some channels. They didn't cut through the roof, they cut through the ice. What's happening is there's a huge ice dam there. The solution to it is, and there was a proposal that never got acted on, but the solution is to insulate that section of the roof and insulate that wall, and that will, I think, cure the problem. Jill LaHoolier gave us quotes 5-6 years ago about how to do it, what to do. But the short-term solution is going to require, basically,
I'll call RJ right away, see what he can do.
Well,
We got warm weather coming.
you're asking
so-
for direction from the board. Does the board want Tom to get a hold of the fire department or a contractor and just have it removed?
Yep, just get it done.
I go for just get it
You
done.
guys are get it doneers, right? Sensing you're
Get it done at any price for
I-
what's done.
I don't think you need a motion. I think that's gonna be below our procurement policy.
Put it on
threshold.
eBay.
Sure. I wasn't, there was unclear.
Yep.
case solving.
So you got
Just don't-
that. The next item is a buyout letter. Do you have a recommended motion for the board and a small synopsis of it?
Yeah, so today I spoke with Vermont Emergency Management and just kind of through organic conversation opened up, well, people have reached out to me about services, providing their services to help us with the buyout process. We don't need their services, it's all managed by the state, is the short answer. But I asked, one of the groups was a deconstruction group, nonprofit resource out of Barry. And I talked to them today about, hey, have you guys looked into salvaging or recycling materials? Historical buyouts have made it a requirement to have as much of the building recycled as possible. Turns out that it was a suggestion, but not a requirement. And so we got talking and turns out there's a little concern about Coventry landfill, like taking, there's about 300 buyouts around the state, right? So all this material going up there and, we have a need for new material, for valuable materials just being recycled. They suggested and said, look, we need a letter, just an official request from the town of Johnson that says we would like as much of the buildings in Johnson to be recycled. And that then they can use that to direct the deconstruction contractor. It has to come from us because anything that's salvaged from the buildings and has a value, and that it reduces the amount of the payout to the resident. So it's like if FEMA says, okay, you took 20 windows and they were $1,000, this resident's getting $1,000 less. So that this.
We're getting 20,000.
That's right, and there wasn't really a good mechanism for the state to handle that. By us writing an email, you're just giving the authority to write this email to the state requesting that building part, as much of the building is recycled. Now Vermont Emergency Management can take this up the chain and deal with it at a statewide level. So that's all it is. It just can't come from Vermont Emergency Management to FEMA. It has to be a request of the future owner, us, to say we want these buildings recycled.
So can you draft a letter? Is the board interested in a letter?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
And it doesn't mean it's gonna happen. It's just,
Okay.
it's just starts the
Can
mechanism.
you draft a letter and have it for our first meeting of the year?
Yeah.
First meeting with the new board?
Perfect.
I hate keeping to pile things on our next
do we
meeting.
even need to see it? I mean, it's pretty
Or can I-
straightforward.
Yeah, can I just send it out and say no reservations? Otherwise, we can just send it.
How's the board feel?
I need a point of clarity, I guess, because I just read a fascinating article about communities that have gone through processes of deconstructing buildings and recycling, salvaging and recycling versus what has become the traditional method of getting an excavator in, pounding it to pieces and pounding it into a dumpster. And it's like 4 to 5 times more expensive to salvage the buildings than it is to simply destroy them and put them in a dumpster. Yes, landfill costs, but that's even taking into consideration sending it to the landfill in a 40-foot roll-off box. So I guess my question is, would us saying we want as much salvage as possible potentially lead us to that situation where it's going to cost 4 to 5 times more to demolish the building than otherwise?
I'll send an email to Vermont Emergency Management and copy you guys with those questions to say, what are the ramifications of this? And then from that, I'll also draft a letter. And then, so you'll see that, and you'll also see, the goal is to recycle, right? Like that's the best for the ultimate goal. And right now, the way the FEMA model doesn't support recycling. I'm guessing that article probably had to do with non-FEMA supported?
It had to do with cities actually enacting ordinances requiring
Yeah, you know,
houses be recycled rather than simply demolished.
I work.
And the cost of that was borne by the property owners who wanted to demolish the building, the property owner or the potential developer. And I guess I wouldn't want to pass that cost on to Mark, for example, with his building, unless he wanted to voluntarily take that approach.
I certainly have salvaged some things.
What's
But
that?
technically, whatever.
Yeah, but you'd have
whatever-
the right to do that, presumably, you'd
Yeah.
have the right to do that.
Well,
anyway.
whatever Mark salvages, presumably on paper, is taken off of his check that he receives from the state.
That's what they're saying.
I guess that's
Yeah.
I guess those are ultimately the kinds of questions we
There's also
want to know.
investments I make after the flood.
So can you get those clarifying questions? You said you'd send it to them and just
Yeah,
copy us and, we'll have the information. I think it's great to recycle where it can be done. I don't necessarily think the entire building being a.
I think it's kind of ridiculous anyway. I mean, just I'm being very simple here. A newel post, crying out loud, that might have came out of your great grandfather's house. And then you put it in your house. Then you had the buyout, right? So technically, if you take that newel post out, you're supposed to reimburse the federal government for the money that they gave you for that house?
They just give you less.
They just give you less.
But that's ridiculous.
Well, I think that's.
You could smash the whole place up and it would be destroyed forever. It's not being a good steward, but with
I think-
your environment.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point of this letter, is like pointing out the ridiculousness of the process. Is that here we are with a shortage of materials around the world, and we're smashing them up and putting them in a landfill, and so I think what mechanism is, but I don't know that it's appropriate. My take was, this is again just speculation, is that Vermont Emergency Management didn't have the tools to go to FEMA and say, well, in Vermont, we want to do it differently than your model around the rest of the country. So it's like, we're kind of reinventing the wheel on a better tomorrow, but it has to start somewhere.
Are they gonna go around and check and say, oh, that newel post is missing?
I have no idea.
It's.
Yeah, but
Probably not.
It is, it's foolish that, somebody who takes their own time to take the window out is gonna be charged for the prices. It is, the whole thing is nonsense.
Yeah. Yeah, I have all brand new windows in that room within 5 years.
And I have a 200-year-old house that has more snow inside than outside because of wind yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think you have clarity on this,
Yeah.
right? To keep things moving. We're going on to the next.
Clear as mud.
Yeah,
All Mike's questions are based on his assumption that the federal government's efficient in what they do.
well, we're finding out that's not the case,
The last thing before executive
which
session.
we knew anyway.
Was a snow removal request. I believe Tom had gotten some more clarity from me. What are the board's feelings? Yay or nay? Do we need to?
Well, the school doesn't belong to the town anymore. It belongs to the Unified School District.
So you're a nay.
And it's subsequently been determined that the school didn't actually make the request.
That was a private landowner.
Yeah.
Apparently, which is my misunderstanding.
So I would have a hard time authorizing the town to remove that.
George Hill
case.
Road is ours,
Yes. Tom Highway.
and the parking spaces are at school and the
Okay.
daycare,
They're not ours.
they're not ours.
I think.
And where did the snow come from that's piled up in the parking spaces?
It's my understanding the snow is on the property owned by Travis Hill.
Yep.
Which houses the daycare. I don't know, it sounds like maybe the school also uses those parking spaces.
Uh-huh.
I can't confirm that. The request came from a relative of the owner of the property. If it was from the school and the supervisory union, would not be having this conversation.
I would hope we would be.
You know, it would be a lot cleaner, like, so. But it came through a phone call to Lydia, which then got relayed to Jason, which then got relayed to Evan, and then relayed to me later. And it was, just feels messy.
At the end of the day, Peter, what I'm gonna say is where I sit, it doesn't matter where the snow came from. Because our highway department plows snow out of the road. Not sure if you ever noticed some ends up in your driveway. You were responsible for
Is
moving that.
that what that was?
So it
It
doesn't
ultimately
matter.
came from the sky.
There you go.
And we're opening up a big box here too, that if you do that and people find out about it, next thing you know, you're gonna have all kinds of calls. I want you to remove the snowbank that's by my place too.
I think we already get that, but, no no go. No,
I can't even believe I
All right.
had this discussion about a pile of snow.
All right, so the answer is no. Would you like to relay that to?
I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
I got an email from Jasmine Yuris. The oven committee wants to apply for a couple of small grants.
You weren't even in our report.
Do they need to come before the select board, or could they just go ahead and apply for it? They're less than $1,000.
And there's no town match?
Yes.
I wish,
Yes, there is no town
No,
match.
no town match.
Then we don't need to get involved.
Don't.
Let them take care of themselves.
Move those things.
since I've been on the board in a scenario like this, the board has never not approved it. I wish, does she send these requests to Tom as well? I shouldn't
It
send them
came
to
John,
me.
yeah, this season.
Yeah, I don't receive them, but
When they come in,
Sunday.
okay.
So the question is, can they make an application?
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
Sure.
And then if they're successful, we would approve it,
okay,
right?
apply away.
And I have, liquor and tobacco license from Maple Fields.
It's renewal, yeah. Does the board have any qualms with that?
No,
All right,
Fire away.
Just one of the things I had.
sign away.
you should have added them under additions.
I think I was gone somewhere.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, we have 3 executive sessions coming up. The first one for employee evaluation. Do we want to make a motion to go into all 3, understanding there may be a motion coming out, or do we want to go in individually? There are different reasons for each.
I would make a motion
A blanket.
to go into executive session for employment evaluation under 1 VSA 313A3, to go into an executive session to discuss a pending or potential litigation matter, which needs to be a 2-part motion. And the two-part motion is, it would put the town at a disadvantage if it's discussed in open session. And that would be under 1 VSA 313(1)(e). And a third executive session to discuss possible negotiation over real estate or lease. I'm suggesting it's 1 VSA 313(2), or it could be 1 VSA 313(6), which is where discussion of the item is not subject to the public records request.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the board is entering executive session.
Recording stopped.
9